I had known for a long time that I didn't belong in this family. Even as a child, I realized I was like a misplaced puzzle piece among my own relatives. While my entire family praised the stable path, going to college, graduating, and landing a decent office job, I just wanted to draw. I could spend hours with colored pencils, charcoal, and later a digital tablet, creating worlds that only I understood. But to my parents, my drawings were nothing more than a waste of time. My sister Amanda was the pride of the family. She went to a prestigious university, got a degree in economics, and married Ryan, a guy working in finance, right after graduation. Every family dinner revolved around stories of her successful career, Ryan's smart investments, or their plans to buy a bigger house. I was never the center of the conversation. Unless someone used me as an example of what not to do. I still remember the day I told my parents I wasn't going to college. We were in the kitchen, and my mom was drying the last dish after dinner. I had rehearsed my words countless times in my head before saying them out loud, but nothing could have prepared me for her reaction. "What did you just say?" My mom froze, the dish towel still in her hand, looking at me like I had just uttered something horrifying. "I don't want to go to college. I enrolled in a 3D animation course." I swallowed hard, trying to stand my ground. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then, she placed the dish in the sink, turned to me, and her voice rose sharply. "Are you out of your mind? You plan to waste your life drawing nonsense?" Before I could say anything, my dad jumped in. His voice was calmer but no less disappointed. "Look at Amanda. She has a degree, a respectable job. What are you going to do with this drawing of yours? Live off us forever?" I clenched my fists. "I can support myself. A lot of people make money from animation on YouTube now. If I work hard." Amanda laughed. "YouTube?" She raised an eyebrow mockingly. "Oh my God. This kid thinks she's going to be a millionaire drawing cartoons online." Ryan, sitting next to her, smirked. "Plenty of people try, but how many actually make it? Keep dreaming. You'll end up working a part-time job at a coffee shop sooner or later." I felt a tightness in my chest, but I didn't cry. I was used to being belittled. The days that followed were tense. My mom wouldn't even look at me, my dad just shook his head whenever I entered the room, and Amanda still visited every weekend to brag about her new job, her latest raise, and, of course, to throw in a jab about my childish hobby. I threw myself into my studies, ignoring all the ridicule. Every time I opened my computer to draw, I remembered their words. I let them fuel me. I didn't need their approval. I was going to prove them wrong. The problem was, proving it wasn't as easy as I thought. At first, I actually started to believe they were right. The early days on YouTube were a nightmare. I spent hours editing videos, drawing frame by frame, learning how to adjust audio and add effects, only to get a few dozen views. Some nights, I stayed up until dawn checking if anyone had left a comment, but the results were disappointing. My first videos were clumsy, the animation stiff, the storytelling weak. And of course, my family never missed a chance to remind me of that. Amanda especially loved to mock me. Every time she visited, she'd smirk when she saw me glued to my computer. "Still playing around with your little drawings?" She scrolled through her phone and scoffed. "I just read an article saying 90% of YouTubers don't make a dime. But hey, maybe you'll be lucky enough to be in the 10%, right?" My parents didn't even try to hide their disappointment anymore. Every dinner, my dad asked the same question. "When are you going to get a real job?" I never answered, I just kept drawing. Even though my channel wasn't taking off, I knew I couldn't give up. I started analyzing successful animation channels, studying their techniques. I joined forums for independent animators, learned how to make movements smoother, how to create characters with more depth. I improved, little by little. Then, one day, one of my videos suddenly blew up. It wasn't the one I thought would succeed, just a short animation, a simple story about a lost cat, but somehow it resonated with people. Overnight, it hit 500,000 views. Then, 1,000,000. Then, 1,000,000. My inbox was flooded with messages from strangers. I cried watching this. Thank you for making it. My kid has watched it 10 times. Do you sell merchandise? Can you make a part 2? I need to know what happens next. I couldn't believe it. But I didn't stop. I used this momentum to push my channel forward, constantly creating new stories and improving my animation quality. Gradually, my following grew. 1,000,000, then 1,000,000. One day I received an email from a company wanting to sponsor my video. For the first time, I made real money from my passion. But I didn't say a word to my family. I didn't want to give Amanda a chance to mock me, or see my parents look at me with skepticism. I let them believe I was still failing. They continued to talk about me as if I were living in a fantasy world, while I quietly proved them wrong. As time passed, my channel kept growing. 1,000,000 subscribers, then 2,000,000. I started getting contracts for short animated films, selling my own merchandise, and opening an online store. My bank account grew thicker each month, but I remained silent. Until one day, I decided it was time for them to know. That night was a typical weekend dinner. Amanda and Ryan were there, and my parents were busy preparing the barbecue. Once everyone was seated, I set my fork down and cleared my throat. I have an announcement. All eyes turned to me. I'm moving out. I've rented my own apartment. A heavy silence filled the room. Amanda was the first to speak, half laughing, half mocking. Oh wow, so you finally accepted that it's time to be an adult? Who's helping you pay rent? Dad narrowed his eyes, suspicion lacing his voice. Where did you get the money for rent? I met his gaze and smiled slowly. From my YouTube channel. Mom dropped her spoon onto her plate. Amanda nearly choked on her wine. Ryan's eyes widened. No way, Amanda snapped, her tone sharp. YouTube doesn't make that kind of money. I shrugged, taking a sip of water. I could afford to rent an entire house if I wanted to. I saw the confusion in their eyes. They had never believed I would succeed. But now, the truth was right in front of them. They could accept it, or not. But for me it no longer mattered. From that day on, my family's attitude changed. But not in the way I expected. At first they said nothing about me moving out. My parents were a bit cold about it, but no one openly objected. Amanda was suspiciously quiet, only throwing me a few doubtful glances. I knew they hadn't fully processed the situation yet, but I wasn't about to waste time explaining. I had money, I had a career, I was independent. That was all they needed to know. On the day I moved into my new apartment, no one in my family helped. I hadn't expected them to. I stood alone in the empty living room, watching the afternoon sunlight stream through the windows onto the polished floor. No more disappointed sighs from my dad. No more snide remarks from Amanda at dinner. This was my life. And I naively thought that from now on, I would be free. It started with small favors. One evening my mom called, her voice hesitant. Olivia, sweetheart, our washing machine keeps breaking down. Do you know anyone who can fix it? I understood immediately. My parents never asked for help directly, they would just drop hints until I offered. I sighed, but still replied. I'll send you some money to get it repaired. Mom instantly brightened. Oh, you're such a good girl. I knew you'd help. I transferred the money right then and there, not thinking much of it. I was making more than they ever imagined, and if a small amount could make my parents happy, then it wasn't a big deal. But then, the requests started coming more frequently. Dad called me one afternoon while I was finishing an illustration for a major project. Sweetheart, our electricity bill is really high this month and we're a bit short. Can you help out a little? Amanda texted me late at night. Olivia, Joey is growing so fast I have to keep buying him new clothes. Can you help me out just this month? The next month they called again. This time it was the water bill. Then roof repairs. Then property taxes. Then groceries for the kids. I started to feel like something wasn't right. At first I convinced myself that it was fine, I was making enough money to help my family, wasn't that a good thing? But then I realized, they weren't just asking for help. They assumed it was my duty. One evening, I dropped by my parents' house for dinner as usual. The moment I sat down, Dad let out a sigh and started the all-too-familiar conversation. Property taxes went up so much this year, your mom's been worried sick. Mom set her spoon down, looking at me expectantly. Amanda, meanwhile, kept her eyes glued to her phone, as if this conversation had nothing to do with her. I stayed silent for a moment before asking, "So, what's your plan?" The room went completely still. Mom stared at me as if I had just said something absurd. Amanda finally looked up from her screen, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Mom's voice was sharper now. "I mean, have you figured out how to pay for it, or are you expecting me to help, like always?" Mom sighed, as if I had disappointed her. "You make so much money. What's a little help? We raised you for so many years." Dad nodded in agreement. "That's right, you're living a comfortable life while we're struggling. Don't you think that's unfair?" I let out a small, bitter laugh. "Unfair? What about me?" I had worked myself to exhaustion to get to where I was. When they laughed at me, I still pursued my passion, and now, they saw my success as nothing more than an open wallet for their convenience. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I pulled out my wallet, placed a check on the table. My parents smiled. Amanda gave me a quiet nod, as if I had simply fulfilled an expected obligation. That time, I gave in. And it was the biggest mistake I ever made. After that, things only got worse. Amanda and Ryan ran into financial trouble after having their second child. Ryan lost his job, and Amanda had to take time off work to care for the baby. So, naturally, they turned to me. "I know you're making good money," Amanda said over the phone. "Rent prices are crazy high. We might not be able to keep up. Can you help out a little?" I wanted to say no, but I didn't. I paid Amanda's rent. I covered the hospital bills when her kid got sick. I even paid for preschool tuition for her eldest. Meanwhile, my parents kept coming up with reasons to ask for money. Car repairs, a new stove, a broken fridge. I don't remember the last time I transferred money to them. I just knew it had become routine, an unspoken expectation. And I wondered, was I helping my family? Or was I being used? At some point, supporting my family became an obligation that no one needed to say out loud anymore. I paid my parents' bills without them asking. I sent money to Amanda every month, knowing that if I didn't, she'd call me with that tired voice, listing all the things her kids needed. Food, clothes, tuition. As time passed, the amount I spent on my family only grew. But I thought, what's the harm? I made good money. I had no one else but them. If I could ease their worries, why wouldn't I? And then, I decided to do something special. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary was coming up. I wanted to give them a gift they would never forget. I booked a luxury trip to Hawaii, covering everything. First-class flights, an oceanfront hotel, sightseeing tours, fine dining experiences. I wanted them to truly enjoy themselves for once. I even included tickets for Amanda, Ryan, and the kids. When I announced it at our usual Sunday dinner, the room went silent for a moment. "Are you serious, Olivia?" Mom asked, her eyes wide with shock. "Completely serious. Everything's booked. We leave next week." I smiled, feeling genuinely excited to see their happiness. Amanda glanced at Ryan before turning back to me, her voice tinged with jealousy but still trying to sound pleased. "Wow. You really spent that much, just to take the whole family on vacation?" "Yes," I replied. "We deserve to have a good time together." The trip was perfect. I saw my parents smile more than ever. Amanda and Ryan finally got some time to relax, and the kids ran freely along the beach. I thought that maybe, at last, I had done the right thing. Maybe this was how I could keep my family together. But I was wrong. A few weeks after returning from Hawaii, I moved on to another plan. gifting my parents a new car. Their old one was falling apart, and I knew they couldn't afford a replacement. On the night of their anniversary party, I handed them a small gift box. Mom opened it, and when she saw the car keys inside, she looked up at me, eyes wide with shock. "Go outside and see," I said. Everyone rushed to the front yard, and there, parked in the driveway, was a brand new SUV with a giant red bow on top. My mom cried, my dad stood in stunned silence. The entire evening, they kept hugging me, telling me I was a wonderful daughter, that they were so proud of me. I believed them. I believed that, after years of being overlooked, I had finally earned the recognition I had always longed for. I had no idea that right after that night, they were already planning to betray me. One Saturday morning, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced. I thought I'd help my mom clean up a bit, maybe check on the new car with my dad. While Mom was outside in the garden, I wandered into Dad's office. I had always loved this room. It was where I used to do my homework as a kid, where I once dreamed of a bigger future. I flipped through some old papers on his desk until a thick envelope, stamped by a law firm, caught my attention. I hadn't intended to read it, but then, a line on the header made me freeze. Last will and testament of... I opened the envelope. And I went numb. My parents' entire estate, the house, their savings, everything, was being left to Amanda. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. I read it again, convinced there had to be some mistake. But no. It was all right there, in black and white. After everything I had done, after all the money I had given them, I wasn't part of their plans. The door behind me creaked open. I turned to see my parents standing there, their faces pale as they realized what I was holding. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. My mom bit her lip, stepping forward with her hand outstretched. "Olivia, you shouldn't be going through your father's paperwork." I tightened my grip on the document. "So when were you planning to tell me, before or after you signed it?" Dad cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure. "You don't understand, Olivia. Amanda needs this house more than you do. You have a stable career, you don't need..." "Don't need?" I cut him off with a bitter laugh. "What about everything I've done for you? The money I send every month, the bills I pay, the car I bought, the Hawaii trip I covered." Mom sighed as if I were a stubborn child refusing to see reason. "You're still young, Olivia. You'll make more money. But Amanda has a family, she has kids, she needs the help more than you do." I stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. At that moment, I finally understood. The hugs, the gratitude, the moments they had acted proud of me, it was all a facade. They had never truly seen me as an important part of this family. I had wasted my entire life chasing the approval of people who never valued me. That day, I walked out of my parents' house with a hollow feeling in my chest. Not because of the money I had spent. Not because I wanted to fight Amanda over an inheritance. But because for the first time in my life, I realized I had never truly belonged in this family. For days I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't want to hear their excuses or start an argument. I buried myself in work, trying to push everything out of my mind. But my mother's words haunted me. "You have a career, you don't need this. Amanda has a family, she deserves it more than you." As if I had never existed as a real member of this family. As if I were just a financial resource, an endless wallet for them to exploit. A week later, my mom called me. Her voice was softer than usual, but I knew it was nothing more than a carefully controlled calm. "Olivia, the family needs to meet with you. Come over for dinner on Saturday. We need to discuss some important matters." I almost refused immediately, but then, I decided to go. Not because I thought they would change their minds, but because I wanted to hear them say it all out loud. On Saturday night, I drove to my parents' house, parking right next to the SUV I had bought for them. Just a few weeks ago, I had thought I would always be a part of this home. Now, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to step inside anymore. As I entered, the tension in the air was so thick I could almost cut through it. My dad sat at the head of the table, my mom beside him, while Amanda and Ryan sat across from them. They were all already seated, as if this was some kind of family meeting. One where I was the only one unaware of the agenda. Mom was the first to speak. "Your father and I have thought carefully about the will," she said slowly, choosing her words with deliberate caution. "And we've decided to sign the papers transferring the house to Amanda now, to avoid any complications later." I glanced around the table. Amanda was trying to hide a smile. Ryan kept his head down, pretending to stay out of it. Dad sighed, as if he didn't love this decision but wasn't going to fight it either. I crossed my arms, nodding slowly. "So? That means nothing belongs to me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Amanda shrugged. "Olivia, you don't need this house. I have 2 kids. I need a place to raise them. You live in your fancy apartment. So why are you making a big deal out of this?" I let out a laugh, a hollow, joyless laugh. "You have 2 kids, but who pays your rent? Who covered the hospital bills when your child was sick? Who pays for preschool? Don't act like you don't need me." Amanda opened her mouth to argue, but Mom spoke first. "Olivia, you have to understand. You're the most successful one in the family. You can always make that money back. Amanda can't." I leaned back in my chair, looking at each of them in turn. "Oh. This is what tonight is really about? Not a discussion? Just a declaration that I have no place in this family?" No one said a word. I nodded, took a deep breath, and said something I never thought I would say, out loud. "Fine. If I don't get a share in this family, then from now on, don't expect a single cent from me." The room went so silent I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Mom's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "What do you mean?" I said, standing up and planting both hands on the table. "Starting today, I won't be paying another bill. No more rent for Amanda, no more medical expenses, no more tuition, no more covering anything. If this family sees me as an outsider, then treat me like one." Mom's face paled. "Olivia, you can't do that. We're your family." I looked at her, feeling an odd sense of calm. "So, family doesn't treat each other like this." I turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Mom start crying, Dad calling my name, Amanda muttering angrily under her breath. But I didn't stop. I stepped outside, and just before getting into my car, I glanced at the SUV I had bought for them. It was still registered in my name. That night, I called the insurance company. "Hello, I need to report an asset repossession. The car is still registered under my name, and I want it retrieved immediately." 3 days later, a tow truck pulled up in front of my parents' house. Amanda called me in a fury. "You're a cruel, heartless bitch. How could you take Mom and Dad's car? We're family." I simply chuckled, my voice calm. "Family? Family took my name out of the will. I'm just following the example they set." I hung up. 3 months later, I blocked all their numbers. I left the family group chat. I unfollowed my mom on Facebook, where she was complaining about her ungrateful, traitorous daughter. But I didn't care anymore. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about them, and I had never felt freer. 3 months had passed since I cut ties with my family. At first, the silence felt strange. No more texts from my mom reminding me to cover the utility bills. No more calls from Amanda complaining about rent increases or sick kids. No more snide comments about my job. While quietly accepting my money every month. My apartment felt eerily quiet, but instead of loneliness, I realized it was peace. Without the financial burden of supporting my family, I was able to focus entirely on my career. I invested in a professional studio, hired staff to scale my work. No longer overwhelmed with doing everything alone, I could pour my energy into creativity, instead of drowning in hundreds of small tasks. And then, the magic happened. My YouTube channel grew faster than ever. New projects racked up millions of views, big brands reached out, and sponsorship deals became more frequent. I had once dreamed of reaching 1 million subscribers. Now, that number had surpassed 10 million. I started doing things I had never even considered before. I bought a bigger apartment, one with a spacious office dedicated to my animation studio. I allowed myself to buy things I wanted without guilt, without thinking that money could have helped my family instead. I began traveling, not to fund vacations for others, but simply to enjoy life on my own terms. And then, one day, while strolling down a quiet suburban street, I saw it. A small but breathtaking house. A charming wooden home with a spacious garden, where sunlight streamed through large windows every morning. I had always thought that one day, when I became successful enough, I would buy a house for my family. But now, I realized, I was my own family. I bought it. Not to prove anything. Not to earn anyone's approval. I bought it for me. Occasionally, I still heard news about my parents and Amanda through distant relatives. My parents had to sell off some of their assets to cover their debts. Amanda and Ryan were forced to move into a smaller apartment, since no one was helping with rent anymore. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel regret. It was their choice. My mother still tried to reach me the only way she knew how, through Facebook. I didn't block her, but I never responded. I read her posts, filled with sorrow and blame. Some children, once they get rich, forget who raised them. It's heartbreaking when family is betrayed by their own blood. She expected sympathy. But instead, the relatives who knew the full story spoke up. "Didn't Olivia pay all the bills for years?" one aunt commented. "She bought a car, covered Amanda's rent, and now you're blaming her?" another relative wrote. I didn't have to say a word, the truth spoke for itself. Some nights, I sat in my new home, gazing out at the garden under the moonlight. I thought about all the years I had spent chasing their approval, striving to make them proud, sacrificing to earn their love. But I understood now. They had never truly loved me the way a family should. They only loved me when I had something to give. And the moment I stopped giving, their love disappeared. I have no regrets about walking away from them. I don't need their approval to know that I deserve happiness. I built my life on my own, and I have never felt freer. Olivia's story is not just a personal journey. It's a lesson in self-worth and setting boundaries within a family. Not everyone is loved unconditionally just because they share the same blood. Sometimes, family ties only exist as long as there's something to take advantage of. It took Olivia years to realize that true familial love should never come with financial obligations. Sometimes the best choice isn't to keep sacrificing, it's to let go of toxic relationships in order to protect yourself. Blood doesn't define family, love and respect do. What do you think about Olivia's story? Have you ever been in a situation where your family took advantage of you like she was? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more eye-opening stories about life, family, and valuable life lessons. I used to think I was cursed for being born first. When my mom held my little brother for the first time, she told me, "From now on, you have to be a role model for your brother." But it wasn't a lesson. It was a lifelong sentence. If I cried, I was too sensitive. If my brother screamed, he was just expressing his emotions. If I failed, it was shameful. If my brother failed, it was, at least he tried. My story didn't begin with a major event. It started with 1,000 tiny cuts. Every time I was seen as not good enough, while my brother was forgiven without question. My name is Harper, I'm 35 years old and I grew up in a small town in Oregon, where there were more pine trees than opportunities. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't well off either. My dad worked in the warehouse for a local shipping company, my mom taught part-time English at the middle school. To the neighbors, we were the perfect family, a hard-working couple, 2 well-behaved kids and a red-roofed house with a little front yard. But only those living inside that house knew how rotten things really were. I was born 6 years before my brother Mason, and from the moment Mason cried for the first time, I stopped being a child. I became the big sister who had to set an example. I remember clearly when I was 8, My birthday was cancelled because I got less than an A- in math. That same year Mason destroyed Mom's paintbrush collection, and she just sighed and said, "He's going through a discovery phase." Once, I stayed up studying until almost midnight for midterms. When I got the highest score in class, Dad just said, "Good. But you need to keep it up." A week later, Mason got kicked out of class for talking back to a teacher, and my mom baked his favorite pie and hugged him like she was the one who'd been hurt. That feeling, like I was being punished for doing nothing wrong. If I was good, I made Mason feel bad. If I worked hard, I made Mom feel pressured on his behalf. While I joined the debate team, wrote for the school paper, and helped Mom wash dishes every night, Mason spent his days glued to his game console, skipping school, and always had an excuse about emotional issues. The summer I turned 15, I worked at an ice cream shop to buy SAT prep books. Mason, who was only 9, lost the expensive phone Dad had just bought. I clearly remember Mom saying, "I'm not mad, everyone slips up." I slipped up once, broke a porcelain bowl my grandma gave us, and was grounded for a whole month. Every time I was recognized at school, like when I won a senior year scholarship, Mom always reacted the same odd way. "Hope you don't show off too much, Mason might feel bad." She never hugged me and said she was proud, not once. Every achievement I had was filtered through one lens. Would it make Mason feel inadequate? I learned to suppress my own joy. I stopped talking about what I'd accomplished, stopped sharing happiness, stopped asking anything of my parents. Because whenever I did, I was accused of being selfish, of bragging, of hurting my brother. And worst of all, I believed it. I believed I was responsible for my brother's feelings. I believed I wasn't allowed to make mistakes. I believed love in a family came with conditions. Conditions that required me to sacrifice, stay quiet, and carry the weight. Christmas, when I was 17, I asked the family to attend a musical where I had the lead role. Mason didn't want to go because it was boring, so they all stayed home to watch a movie with him. I stood backstage, stared at the empty seats, and performed like nothing was wrong. When I came home, Mom just said, "You did well, didn't need anyone watching." That's when I began to understand. It's not that I didn't deserve love. It's just that, in this family, I was never seen as someone who needed to be loved. I left home one morning in June. No tears, no goodbyes. No one asked where I'd live, if I had enough money to eat, or if I needed help. My dad said only one thing as I dragged my cheap suitcase down the porch steps. "If you're leaving, you're on your own." And my mom? She just stood in the kitchen, back turned, chopping onions like I never existed. I was 18 years old, had an acceptance to Cal State Long Beach, and not even $1,000 in savings. Scraped together from 3 years of scooping ice cream, babysitting, and writing freelance articles for the local school district's paper. That was all I had to start a new life. The first room I rented was a converted old dorm room on the 3rd floor of a crumbling building in Orange County. It smelled musty and had a cracked window. I shared it with Naomi, an architecture student who taught me how to breathe deeply when my bank account showed $5 and tuition reminders screamed in my inbox. I went to school during the day and worked at night. In the mornings, I poured coffee at a small street corner cafe. In the evenings, I served tables at a packed Mexican restaurant. Between shifts, I buried myself in coding books, drowning in Python and JavaScript like they were my only ticket out of the pit my family called tradition. While I stretched myself thin just to survive, Mason, no, the golden boy of the McKinley household, still lived comfortably in the upstairs bedroom of our parents' home. He was 20 then, supposed to be in school or working. Instead, he played video games all day, changed majors 3 times, and dropped out of everything. When I asked Mom about it, she just said, "He's finding his path. Not everyone knows what they want like you do." Like I was lucky to have direction, and Mason just needed more time for self-discovery. At 21, I officially graduated college after 4 grueling years. No congratulations from my parents, no flowers, no letter. I sent invites, they didn't come. Mom texted a short message. Congrats, don't forget to call your brother. I didn't call. And I no longer cried over things like that. I got hired at a mid-size software company in San Jose, starting from the bottom, tech support. While working, I took cloud system certification courses. At night I studied project management. I had no choice but to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Meanwhile, Mason, now 23, still hadn't finished any program. My parents bought him a used Ford to make it easier for job interviews. 3 months later, the car broke down. He couldn't keep any job for more than 4 weeks. When I asked, Mom said, "He's sensitive, he can't handle toxic environments." I thought about the environments I worked in. Scrubbing restrooms at 1:00 a.m., cleaning up after drunk customers, attending classes until 11:00 p.m., then riding a freezing bus home. But I said nothing. Because if I did, I'd be accused of nitpicking my brother. When I moved into a small apartment in Sunnyvale near my job, my mom called me for the first time in nearly 6 months. Not to ask how I was. She wanted money to help Mason pay for an online coding course. "Just $1,200, Harper, that's not much for you." I froze. That same amount had once meant a month of instant noodles, emergency loans from nonprofits, and begging for scholarships just to pay my own tuition. But I bit my tongue and sent it. Because I still had hope that if I just kept being kind, they would see I was part of the family too. The biggest mistake of my life was waiting for recognition from people who never intended to give it. At 28, I officially became a product development team lead. I bought my first car, a used Subaru. I sent Mason a laptop after hearing from Mom that his was broken. 6 months later, I saw that same laptop listed on Craigslist. Like new, barely used. When I asked Mom, she said, "It didn't suit him." Don't be upset. Didn't suit him? I had spent nearly $1,500 on that thing while still eating cheap sandwiches every lunch to save. The year Mason turned 25, I got a call from Mom. "Can you help with his rent for a few months? Your dad and I are tight on money, he's still looking for a job." I laughed. At the time, I was standing in a conference room, fresh off signing a new project management contract, with nearly a 40% raise. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the first time I ever heard the phrase, "tight on money," used by my parents. And of course it was only ever about Mason. I used to believe that hard work would make them see me as someone worthy, but now I understand, in their eyes, I was nothing more than a convenient money printer. And Mason? No matter how many times he failed, he was always the boy who needed protection. I once thought, if I was good enough, patient enough, they would eventually understand. But no, in my family, kindness wasn't something to be appreciated. It was something to be drained. After I sent rent money when Mason was 25, I planned to step back. I didn't want to keep being the one cleaning up the mess every time my brother tried to find his path and fell. But less than 3 months later, Mom called, again. "Harper, could you help Mason buy a new car? The old one's completely dead, he needs transportation for job interviews." I had just finished a day of endless meetings, my brain felt like it had been slammed against a wall. I was sitting in the car, not even buckled in yet, when I heard Mom's soft voice turn into pleading. She sounded like she was talking about a 3-year-old, not a grown man. "Just a few thousand, Harper, you're doing well. It probably doesn't mean much to you. A few $1,000s? I used to live off instant noodles for a month just to pay my tuition." But I didn't say that. I just stayed silent. "Family is about helping each other during hard times, right?" she continued, and I felt my throat tighten. That sentence. That old phrase, "family comes first." It no longer sounded like a reminder of love. To me, it was an invisible handcuff, tightening around my wrists every time I tried to escape the cycle. I said no. Gently, politely, but firmly. A few days later, I received an email from Dad. Subject, "A few words from a father's heart." The content? A 2-page accusation about ingratitude, family values, and a daughter who forgot where she came from. "If it weren't for your mom and me, how would you have what you do today?" he wrote. "Are you going to let your brother keep drifting forever? You really can't help him even just a little, Harper." I let out a dry laugh when I read the last part. "We don't want anything from you. Just remember that blood is forever." How ridiculous. They always don't want anything until they want everything. I didn't reply, but I knew that was only the beginning. From then on, every few months there was another emergency. Mason got robbed, needed money to replace his laptop. Mason was unemployed, needed help paying off credit card debt. Mason broke up with his girlfriend, needed a place to stay and an advance on a new apartment. Mason wanted to enroll in a very promising startup boot camp, just needed to cover a $2,000 fee. Each time I refused, Mom returned to the same old tactics. Said I was cold. Said I'd become successful and forgotten my roots. Said I was abandoning my own blood. "If you were in trouble, Mason wouldn't hesitate to help you," she once wrote. I almost laughed out loud. Mason once used my credit card when he stayed with me for a few weeks during the summer I was 24, and maxed out $300 I'd saved to pay the electric bill. I had to postpone car repairs to cover it. But no one ever mentioned that. In my parents' eyes, Mason was always a boy who was trying. And me? Even in my 30s, I was still too tough, lacking compassion. One time I was on a business trip in Denver. I had just walked into the hotel when Mom called. She was crying, saying Mason's landlord was threatening to evict him for missing rent. I asked, "Is he working yet?" "No, he's still looking, but it's not his fault. He's under a lot of pressure." "Mom, when I was 26, I worked 2 jobs, slept 3 hours a night, and never asked you for a dime." "That's because you're strong. Mason's different. He's more fragile. He needs us." I hung up mid-call. Not out of anger, just exhaustion. I was tired of being the villain every time I didn't pull out my wallet. I was tired of every favor being treated as a duty, never as a kindness. I was tired of playing the big sister who was never allowed to say no. One time I visited Aunt Ann, Mom's younger sister, someone I rarely saw because the family always said she was stubborn. During lunch she looked at me and asked directly, "Are you tired, Harper?" I nodded. She said only one sentence. "You can't keep feeding a lame horse and then blame it for not running." I sat quietly in the car after that meal, and for the first time, I asked myself, am I enabling Mason by helping our parents cover for him? I was in my home office finishing a quarterly report for an upcoming director meeting when the phone rang. The caller ID said, "Mom." I hesitated for a second, then picked up. The last time she called directly was nearly a year ago, to ask if I could pay for Mason's car repairs. "Harper, sweetheart," she began, voice sugary sweet. The kind of sweetness that made me immediately stiffen, because I knew something rotten always followed. "How's work going? Still at that big software company, right?" I tilted my head, quietly sarcastic. I'd been with Lucentrix for over 6 years, in senior management for nearly 2, and she still couldn't remember the name? "I'm fine. What do you need, Mom?" "Oh, nothing, I miss you, it's been a while since we talked." "What do you want?" I cut in. I knew that tone too well. There was a short pause. Then her voice dropped, shaky like she was about to cry. I closed my eyes. I knew the blow was coming. "It's Mason. He's in trouble, serious this time, Harper." I gripped the phone tightly. "Mason. Again. He borrowed a large sum, $40,000. From the wrong people. They're starting to threaten him." I sat up straight. 40,000? I tried to stay calm. "Why did he borrow that much?" "That's not important right now, Harper. What matters is his life is being threatened. Do you understand?" I scoffed. "Not important? A 30-year-old man takes out a loan the size of a house down payment, and my mother thinks it's not worth discussing? What do you want me to do?" Help him pay it off. Just this once. I know you can. You're the most successful in the family. You've always been strong. But Mason, he's not like you. He can't handle pressure like you can. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. At the quiet house I spent nearly a decade working to afford. The car parked out front was my reward for years of early mornings and late nights. Everything around me came from my own effort. No support. Not a dollar from family. And now my mother wanted me to take $40,000, my emergency savings, my future security, and throw it into the bottomless pit called Mason. No, Mom. My voice was soft, but firm as steel. I can't, and I won't. That moment felt like pressing the detonation button on a bomb. My mom's voice instantly changed. No more gentleness, no more pleading. Only cold fury, sharp as a blade. You're really that selfish? Your brother could be killed and you refuse to help him? I'm not responsible for his terrible decisions, I replied, my hands starting to tremble. You really want to see your own brother's blood spilled, just because you're too stingy to open your wallet? I choked up, not because I was convinced, but because I was stunned. For the first time in my life, my mother threw a graphic, bloody image on the table. Like a knife to my throat, to force my surrender. You're blaming me if something happens to Mason? Who else will save him if not his sister? The only successful one, the only one capable, and she's the one abandoning him. No, the only one being used, treated like a walking ATM, that's me. A deadly silence filled the call. I continued. I've helped. I've given money. I've swallowed my anger for years. I used to think that if I sacrificed enough you'd finally acknowledge me, but no, you just wanted more. Again and again. Don't play the victim. Your father and I raised you, taught you. Without us, you wouldn't be where you are today. No, Mom. I am where I am because I chose not to live like Mason. I chose to be responsible, to be independent. And now, I choose to say no. My mom started shouting, but I couldn't hear it clearly anymore. My heart was pounding, chest on the verge of bursting. Then I hit the end call button. My hand trembled as I set the phone on the table, not out of fear, but because for the first time I said no. And stood by it. I thought everything was over after that call. I had been firm, I had refused. I had hung up and held my ground. But I forgot one important thing. My family doesn't know how to accept the word no. 3 days later, I received a call from the security department at Wellsbury Bank, where I kept all my savings and personal investments. The woman's voice was calm, but every word felt like a knife to the chest. Hello, Ms. Harper McKinley. We detected suspicious activity on your account at 3:12 a.m. from an unfamiliar IP address in the Portland suburbs. The individual correctly answered 3 security questions: your first pet's name, your elementary school, and your mother's birth date. I went numb. Not just any hacker would know my first cat was named Pickle, that I went to Jefferson Elementary, and that my mom was born on November 4th. Only someone in the family would know that. Only Mason. Was there a transfer request? I asked, voice dry. Yes, ma'am. There was a request to transfer $17,800 to an account under the name J.M. Walters. However, the system flagged it as potential fraud and blocked the transaction. Fortunately, no funds were processed. I hung up, cold sweat breaking down my back. My hands shook as I opened my laptop to change all passwords, enable two-factor authentication across all accounts. Then I called my company's IT department and requested a full sweep of both personal and work devices, isolating everything from the internal network until I could be sure it wasn't compromised. I wasn't angry anymore. Not furious. Only hollow. Like a bottomless pit inside me. Jason. My brother. The same boy who cried when he lost my wallet at 15. The one who promised to grow up after every mistake, had now actively tried to steal the money I'd spent nearly a decade saving. Not borrowing. Not asking. Stealing. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mason's hands typing in my login. Like a stranger. Like a thief sneaking into my life in the dark. On the 4th day, I got a call from Aunt Ruth, my dad's sister. Someone who rarely got involved in family matters. "Harper, I heard bits and pieces. Your mom's been telling everyone you abandoned your brother while he was on the brink of death." I gripped the phone, heart racing. What else did she say? She's saying, "You're living in luxury with your own house, your own car, 6-figure savings. But you refuse to share with your brother, who's being threatened daily." I let out a bitter laugh. "Auntie, he just tried to hack into my bank account, nearly took $18,000. Aunt Ruth fell silent. I told her everything, from the call asking for $40,000 to the account breach, and the truth that I had always been the financial shadow behind this family. She said nothing for a long moment, then sighed. "They're not the people I used to know, Harper." That night I printed out all evidence of the hacking, bank reports, IP address logs, the recipient account name, and filed it all into a personal folder. I sent a copy to my attorney, though I wasn't planning to file charges, at least not yet. I also completely blocked all communication from my mom, dad, and Mason. No calls, no texts, no emails. I created a new email address for work and updated every piece of personal security information. With every step I took, I felt lighter. As if I was cutting loose a rope that had been choking me for over 30 years. But then, something strange happened. One night, I got a message from Mason's ex-girlfriend, Alyssa. "I know we've never been close, but I thought you should know this. Jason's been acting really strange. He keeps muttering things like, 'I need to get back what's mine, they owe me, I'll teach them a lesson.' I don't know what's going on, but it's not good." I sat in the dark, hand gripping my phone tightly. I used to think I was just protecting my accounts. Now I realized I needed to protect myself. I thought the account breach was the peak of it all. But it turns out, it was just the beginning of another storm. One that didn't go after my money, but after my reputation. Just 1 week after I cut off all contact and locked down every account, I started getting strange messages from relatives. A cousin in Florida, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, messaged me. "Harper, what's going on? I heard your brother almost got assaulted over dead and you refused to help?" A cousin on my mother's side sent me a direct link to a public Facebook post from my mom, tagged with my full name. There are people born into a family who choose to turn their backs. When a sibling cries for help, all they care about is clutching their money. Success doesn't mean character. Below it were dozens of comments from old acquaintances, church friends, and former classmates of my dad. Everyone was heartbroken over the misguided but pitiful son, and outraged at the cold-hearted sister living in luxury who refuses to help her family. I felt like I'd been thrown into the mud and no one even asked if I wanted to be pushed. That day, I received an email from my father, Mr. Richard McKinley, who always liked to call himself the moral pillar of our family. Subject: Ultimatum. Think again before it's too late. Papa, your mother and I have endured enough. You've chosen to prioritize personal gain over family. If you continue to abandon your brother during his time of need, this family will no longer consider you a part of it. Remember, you can't have everything without paying the price. Your success didn't come from nowhere, it was built on your parents' sacrifice. It's time for you to give back. If you don't do the right thing, there will be consequences. I didn't know what made me angrier. The shameless threat or the blatant distortion of my efforts. Give back. I had been working since I was 16. I paid my tuition, bought my own meals, covered rent, without a single dollar from them. And now, he had the audacity to write that I owed them my success? A few hours later I received 2 more calls, one from Uncle Ben, one from Aunt Evelyn, both of whom had been fed Mom's sob story for the past week. They sounded genuinely concerned about Mason. "Harper, we heard Mason is being threatened by dangerous people. Are you sure you shouldn't help your brother? I gripped the phone, my lips trembling in frustration. Mason isn't in some life or math situation. He just wants someone to bail him out of a hole he dug himself, and now he's smearing me all over the place, just because I dared to say, no. Aunt Evelyn fell silent, but I knew. I had planted a seed of doubt. I realized that if I didn't speak up, the lie would keep spreading, tainting my name with the same fake morality my mom preached every week to her church friends. That night, I opened my laptop. Typed line after line, angry but clear-headed. I drafted an email to every relative, those who had only heard one side of the story. I attached screenshots of Dad's threatening email. Bank records showing the hacking attempt. An audio clip of Mason yelling, "If you don't give me the money, you'll regret it." I wrote, "If any of you ever thought I was the ungrateful child, please read this carefully. If you've ever pitied Mason, understand the full picture. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for one thing only. Do not enable toxic behavior. And do not let the word family be used to manipulate you." After I hit send, I turned on airplane mode. I poured myself a glass of red wine. But that wine tasted more bitter than any night I'd ever lived through. I had told the truth. I had exposed them. And in doing so, I had accepted something. From this moment on, in their eyes, I was no longer the daughter of Richard and Elaine McKinley. I had no intention of ever seeing Jason again. I blocked his number, blocked his email, shoved aside every lingering emotion tied to that name. But when the bank sent me the official report of a second breach attempt, this time from a cybercafe just a few blocks from Mason's place, I knew. Either I confront this head-on, or I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I couldn't let this drag on like a lingering fever. I had to face it. Face him. That Friday night, I drove to the last known mailing address Mason used, a rundown apartment near Portland's industrial district. Before getting out of the car, I turned on the recording feature on my smartwatch, checked that my phone was fully charged, and slid a pepper spray can into my coat pocket. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't there to plead. I was there to end it. The door opened after 4 knocks. Mason appeared, scruffy beard, sunken eyes, wearing a torn t-shirt, not a hint of regret on his face. On the contrary, he smiled like I had come bearing gifts. "So you finally showed up." I stepped inside, scanning the room. On the table was a pile of papers, bills, IOUs, scraps with strangers' names scribbled down. An old laptop was open, paused on a banking website. I immediately recognized the login screen. My login screen. The one someone had tried to break into just yesterday. I'll ask directly, "Did you try to access my bank account?" Mason didn't even deny it. He shrugged, casually, disturbingly so. "You weren't going to help. I was just speeding things up." I nearly lost it. But I remembered why I was there. I needed proof. And he had just handed it to me, with his voice, and his arrogance. "You know that's a crime, right? You think I had a choice? You pushed me to the edge. This is just shared funds. We're family." I stood there, stunned. Shared funds? Did he actually believe that? Or worse, had he been taught to believe that? "I'm not this family's ATM anymore, Mason, and if you try again, I will press charges." Right then, the door burst open. I turned like a bad rerun. My parents stormed in. "Harper, what are you doing?" Mom shrieked. "I'm collecting evidence for the police," I said coldly. "Jason just admitted to hacking my account." "He's desperate, Harper, can't you understand? When someone's cornered, they do irrational things," Dad's voice thundered. Loud, but hollow. "Rational or not, you think theft is forgivable?" Mom lunged forward, tears pouring. Tears I once believed, now saw as cheap performance. "We're family, sweetheart. Family doesn't send each other to jail." I looked at the 3 of them. 3 different faces, one expression. Not regret. Just fury that I had refused the role of their financial scapegoat. I pulled out my phone and tapped play on the recording. The room froze as Mason's voice echoed, clear and undeniable. I was just speeding things up. Dad's face went pale. Mom took a step back. Jason still looked indifferent, like he hadn't grasped the gravity of what just happened. If any of my personal information is compromised again, I said clearly, every word slicing the air, I will submit this recording and the full digital trace history to the police. My mom opened her mouth, likely to protest, but I raised my hand. And if anyone from this family calls, texts, or lies about me, again, I will consider it harassment, and I will not show mercy. My dad finally spoke, his voice lower. If you walk out of this apartment with that recording, then don't ever expect to be welcomed in this family again. I looked at him for a long moment, then replied in the calmest voice I've ever had. Good, because for the first time, I don't need to be welcomed anymore. I walked out the door, without looking back. I drove straight home after the confrontation. No tears, no panic. Just an eerie silence, like after all these years my mind had finally been released from an invisible shackle. I sat down at my computer at 2 a.m. My hands didn't tremble. I opened the folder named Family Evidence, where I had stored all recordings, the bank's fraud reports, screenshots of threatening messages, and my father's ultimatum email. I had collected them over the past month, as a survival instinct. But now, I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted to be free. I wrote a public Facebook post. No flowery words, no complaints. Just the truth. I wrote about the favoritism, the manipulation, the endless help that was never repaid, and the ultimate betrayal. My own brother breaking into my bank account. I attached the recording of his confession, the fraud report from the bank, and my father's chilling email. I ended the post with one line. I will no longer stay silent to protect those who stepped on me to stay afloat. I will no longer feel ashamed for others' actions. From now on, the truth will speak for itself. I hit post. No hesitation. 3 hours later, I woke up to a storm of notifications. The post spread like wildfire. Family members, old classmates, Jason's former co-workers, even neighbors from the small town I grew up in, began commenting, sharing, and sending messages. Decades of silence had finally been broken. Cousin Tina from Nevada wrote, Jason borrowed $2,000 from me and then blocked my number. Now it all makes sense. Uncle Ben messaged, you did the right thing. The truth isn't always easy to hear, but it always needs to be told. The most surprising was a message from Jason's current roommate. I didn't know his past. After reading your post, I checked my stuff and found a credit card in my name I never opened. He's getting kicked out in the next 3 days. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt lighter. A few days later, Jason got fired from his last part-time job, a small electronics store in South Portland. The store owner was an old high school classmate of mine. He read the post and called to confirm. I can't keep someone who tries to break into his sister's account working around a POS terminal. The next news came as an expected consequence. My parents deleted all their social media accounts overnight. All the posts about family is everything and ungrateful children vanished. Those who used to praise them started asking questions. My mom no longer shared photos of Sunday lunch with the family. My dad stopped preaching about traditional values in his golf group. According to Aunt Ruth, people at church had noticeably distanced themselves. No one believed anymore that they were victims of a rebellious daughter. Their reputation collapsed quietly, without me needing to say another word. And me? I started over. The following month I received my promotion, officially becoming Director of Product at Lucentrix. My manager said, Harper, you're not just talented, you stand for your principles. This company needs people like you in leadership. I didn't cry when I got the news. But when I stepped out into the parking lot that day, I stood there and smiled. For the first time, my success wasn't attributed to family support or being helped. It was mine completely. I also met Alex, a cybersecurity engineer I met through a professional conference. He was respectful, calm, and absolutely respected personal boundaries. When I briefly mentioned that I was recovering from an extremely toxic family situation, he simply nodded and said, "I'm here if you want to talk, and if not, that's completely okay too." That one sentence brought me to tears later that night. I moved into a new apartment. Smaller, quieter, with a balcony full of lavender and mint. No one knows the address except my lawyer and my closest friend. I installed cameras, changed my phone number, and cut ties with everything that once connected me to the chaos called family. Now my nights are no longer filled with my mom's message alerts or Mason's midnight money requests. They're filled with the clink of wine glasses between me and Alex, soft jazz playing from the Bluetooth speaker, and the wind rustling outside the window. I used to fear being cut off. But, it turns out, some ties, you can only breathe once you cut them. Harper's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. But from that pain she learned to rise, to set boundaries, and to choose freedom over distorted duty. She didn't just expose the truth, she reclaimed her life, her dignity, her finances, and her peace. What do you think about Harper's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it the only way to truly protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments. My name is Lily. I had just turned 16 that afternoon, and I never imagined the most memorable birthday gift I'd get would be getting kicked out of my own home by my own mother. "Giving you a sneak peek, Grandpa?" I whispered into the phone, live streaming via FaceTime with my grandfather Curtis, who was in Florida. I walked slowly toward my bedroom door, heart full of hope. He had promised to send me a new set of gouache paints from my favorite craft store, the expensive kind I'd been eyeing for months. I had pictured the moment I'd open the door and see the brown paper-wrapped box, neatly placed on my old easel, next to my unfinished sketches. I opened the door. No easel. No paints. Not a single trace of me. Instead, a pristine white crib stood in the middle of the room, sunlight cutting across it through the blinds. The walls were now painted in pastel tones, decorated with tiny elephants floating on balloons. Everything that belonged to me. Hand-drawn posters, art prints, my favorite literary quotes taped to the wall, was gone without a trace. I froze. This room used to be the only place where I could truly be myself. Now it looked like I had never existed. I called out softly, "Mom?" Then louder, "Dad?" Their voices drifted up from downstairs, casual, chatting from the kitchen. I still had the FaceTime call going. Grandpa was seeing all of it live. I walked down the stairs like my legs were made of lead. The kitchen door was slightly ajar. I heard my mom, Amelia, talking calmly to my dad, Greg, whose voice sounded tired and worn, like someone who had long given up trying to have a say. "She'll understand, Greg. Sooner or later. We should have waited until she got home." What for? So she could throw one of her usual tantrums? I pushed the door open. What the hell happened to my room? Mom turned, adjusting the lapel of her ash-gray blazer, her face completely unreadable. "We need to talk, Lily. There have been some small changes." "You mean turning my room into a nursery without telling me?" I gripped the phone tighter. "I've lived there for 16 years. Dad avoided eye contact, pretending to be deeply focused on his lukewarm coffee. Mom said, "Your sister Brooke is pregnant and needs a quiet space to rest." Your room made the most sense. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "And what about me? Where am I supposed to sleep? The garage?" Mom crossed her arms, expression ice cold. "You'll be staying with Aunt Lorraine. Temporarily, until we figure things out." "Temporarily?" I repeated, my throat tightening. "I'm a family member, not a piece of furniture you move around at convenience." "Lily," Mom cut in. "It's time you stopped acting like a child. You're 16. You're not the center of the universe anymore. Brooke is about to become a mother. You should learn to support, not disrupt." "And what about what I need?" I snapped. "Nobody's asking how I feel. Nobody's standing up for me." Mom glanced at Dad. He kept staring at the floor, like if he did it long enough this would all disappear. Powerless. Cowardly. "Lorraine will pick you up tonight," Mom said, as if announcing a weather update. "I've already packed a few of your essentials." I looked at the two people in front of me. The man who taught me to ride a bike. The woman who once held me through a fever. Now they felt like strangers, casually rearranging my life like grocery items. "Happy birthday to me," I said, voice hollow. "Don't be dramatic," Mom sighed. "You'll have a better space, closer to school. And Lorraine's very accommodating." I turned and walked away. "You're right, Mom. This isn't a tragedy. But at least now I know exactly where I stand in this house." I ended the FaceTime call with Grandpa as I headed upstairs, but not before whispering, "Did you see all that?" His voice came through instantly, firm and clear. "Every word, Lily, every single word." I opened the door to what used to be my room, now the nursery, and stared at the white crib. The floating elephants on the walls seemed to mock me. I placed my hand on the crib rail and silently made a promise. If they think I'll disappear that easily, they have no idea who I really am. The old red suitcase rattled across the cold ceramic tiles as I dragged it down the steps. Each bump felt like a hammer striking the fragile thing we once called family. No one came to see me off. Mom locked herself in her upstairs office, and Dad stayed at the dining table, pretending to read a newspaper he never even flipped open. I hadn't been waiting on the porch for more than a minute when a silver SUV pulled up. Aunt Lorraine stepped out of the driver's seat, wrapped in a brown scarf, her face still carrying traces of sleep, even though it was nearly 6 p.m. She didn't ask anything. She just looked at me, then opened the trunk. On the way to her house, I got a single message. From Mom. "Lily, I hope you'll use this time to reflect on your attitude. It's time you learn not to turn everything into drama." "Don't try," I didn't respond. I knew exactly how I felt, and it wasn't being dramatic. It was betrayal wrapped in the sugary tone of family duty. It was being discarded like an old coat that no longer fit. It was a nameless ache when someone chooses another's comfort over protecting their own child. Aunt Lorraine lived in a quiet suburb about a 40-minute drive from home, where the white picket fences were so perfectly painted that not a single chip dared show. Her house smelled like vanilla and aged pine wood, and the air felt oddly still, like time had frozen between past and present. That night, I sat on the bare guest bed, staring up at the ceiling. Aunt Lorraine had left a cup of hot tea and a few butter cookies on the desk, then quietly went downstairs. She said nothing. I knew she didn't want me to feel interrogated. But somehow, that silence made the lump in my throat harder to swallow. I checked my phone. No messages from Dad. No missed calls. Not a single word, asking if I'd arrived safely. Nothing. I considered FaceTiming Grandpa Curtis like I usually did, but my finger hovered over the button. Maybe I didn't want him to see me like this. Maybe I was afraid he'd see the collapse in my eyes I was trying so hard to hide. The next morning, while Aunt Lorraine was making pancakes, I got a text from an unknown number. No name saved. "Still playing the victim? Brooke's about to be a mom. She needs peace, not your teenage breakdowns. Stop making Mom even more disappointed." I knew it was from Brooke. Her tone was unmistakable. That signature mix of fake concern and subtle contempt. I stared at the message for a long time. Said nothing. But my stomach twisted like someone had grabbed it and squeezed. Aunt Lorraine sat down across from me, placing a plate of pancakes in front of me. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to," she said softly. I looked at her. "They say I'm selfish, that I ruin everything, that I only care about myself." She nodded, neither denying nor looking surprised. Adults often call a child's pain overreacting, because admitting their own mistakes is much harder. I gripped the fork in my hand, but Dad didn't say anything, not a word. He sat right next to Mom, looked at me like he didn't even know who I was. "Knows," she replied. He just didn't have the courage to speak up. Part of me wanted to cry, another part just felt cold. That afternoon, while helping Aunt Lorraine sort through old paintings in the storage room, I found a small box with my name scribbled on it in black marker. I opened it. Inside was a stack of drawings from when I was in 7th grade. Drawings Mom had thrown away during a cleaning spree, claiming they were worthless. Aunt Lorraine had saved them. I was stunned. "I figured someday you'd want to remember what made you happy," she said. That night, I pulled out my sketch pad and sat by the window to draw. For the first time in months, my hand didn't tremble holding the pencil. I was no longer the girl who believed everything would be okay if I just tried hard enough. I knew better now. Family love without fairness and respect is just a trap wrapped in a pretty bow. And I wasn't going to let anyone slap the label selfish onto my pain again. No one has the right to define my worth, especially those who erased my existence just to make room for a crib and a child not yet born. I glanced at the warm light glowing from the room across the hall. Aunt Lorraine was reading, quiet, unforced, uncontrolling. I sat on the bedroom windowsill, legs draped over an old curtain, pencil in hand, sketching a scene I once saw from Grandma's back porch. The place where I painted my first picture ever, using watercolor mixed with rainwater. My phone buzzed, a message from a number I knew too well. "Brooke, are you really okay with ruining a beautiful moment just because of your ego? Do you know Mom cried because of you?" I let out a dry chuckle. Cry? My mother only cried when the property taxes went up, or when groceries weren't arranged the way she liked in the pantry. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out the old sketchbook Aunt Lorraine had given me. On the 3rd page, I stopped. A charcoal drawing of me, standing alone on an empty stage with a single spotlight shining from behind, casting a shadow twice my size. I drew that when I was 10. "You remember the school art show in 5th grade?" Aunt Lorraine asked suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of warm milk, one for her, one for me. "Of course I remember," I said, voice scratchy. Mom scheduled a client dinner that night, and Dad promised he'd come after, but he fell asleep in the car. "And you brought 6 paintings," she added. "One of them was Grandpa Curtis's portrait. He still has it framed in the living room." I smiled faintly. Mom told me I shouldn't get my hopes up for things that don't make money. She sat beside me, placing the mug in my hand. "You didn't draw for 2 years after that," I noticed. "So did Grandpa." I looked down at the sketch. Those shaky, early lines packed with emotion. Why couldn't they see how much it meant to me? "Because they didn't want to see it, Lily," she said gently. "Seeing it means caring. Caring means changing. And change means admitting fault. Not everyone's brave enough to do that." I wrapped my hands around the mug. Its warmth eased something in my chest. "I think Mom truly believes I'm selfish." "Maybe," Aunt Lorraine said. "But sometimes, people slap the label selfish on anyone who dares to stop being someone else's background character." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. A video from Brooke. I pressed play. It was a short clip from last night's dinner. Brooke sitting at the center of a candlelit table, guests raising their glasses to toast her baby. My mother's voice rang out, full of theatrical emotion. "We hope this baby brings unity, love, and selflessness." Everyone clapped. Brooke smiled at the camera and said, "May our child never be the reason a bedroom tears a family apart." I stopped the video. Not because it was offensive, but because it was empty. A performance. Like always. I handed the phone to Aunt Lorraine. She shook her head. "They needed a villain to finish their little story, and you were the easiest target." I suddenly remembered that old sketch. The girl standing at the edge of the frame, forgotten by the stage lights. I picked up my pencil and added a new stroke. A second spotlight. Coming in from a different angle, illuminating the parts the first one missed. Aunt Lorraine watched me draw, didn't ask anything. After a while she stood, and said softly, "I've got a surprise for you tomorrow. It's small, but it might remind you who you used to be." I nodded. My chest still felt hollow, but my pencil strokes were steadier now. That night, I didn't fall asleep right away. I reopened an old message from Grandpa Curtis. "I'll be there Friday night. Make sure you open the door. And bring your old drawing. There's something I want to show you." Something shifted inside me, like a tiny part of my old life was returning. But this time, with the right people, for the right reasons. I texted back, "Bring black coffee, okay? And if you still have a print of my first drawing, you know, the one I made of you, in that old armchair?" His reply came instantly. "Framed since 2015, still hanging in the living room, always made me proud." I turned off the light and laid my phone on the pillow beside me. If they didn't want to remember who I was, then I'd be the one to remind them. Not through rage, but with the very thing they once dismissed: art. And truth. Friday afternoon, just as I was about to take my sketch out to the back porch to wait for Grandpa Curtis, my phone buzzed again. It was from Mom. "We're having a family dinner this Sunday. Everyone will be there to celebrate Brooke's official announcement. There's no reason for you to be absent. We're still a family, Lily." No, I'm sorry, no concern. Just a command, disguised as still a family. I didn't want to go, but I knew that if I refused, Mom would twist the story into another act. That I was making a scene, isolating myself, being selfish. I typed a short reply. "I'll be there." Grandpa Curtis arrived later than usual. His flight from Tampa had been delayed. When he finally walked into Aunt Lorraine's house at 9 p.m., his knit sweater still smelled faintly of airports and bad coffee. But his eyes were as clear as ever, and in his hand was that worn leather folder he never left behind. "You're caught in your mother's game," he said the moment he sat down at the table, "and this game isn't just about Brooke or that crib, it's a lot bigger." I sat silently, watching him open the folder. Inside were copies of documents from the board of Curtis Simons Freight Co., the company he co-founded with a friend back in the 80s. It had thrived for decades, and recently, my mother, Amelia, was invited onto the board as a financial overseer, a role that had once been symbolic. Until a few weeks ago. "She's been pressuring me to transfer my voting power to Brooke," he said, voice heavy. "She says it's to secure the family legacy by merging Brooke and Richard's company with ours." I stared at him. "You mean they're trying to merge? And Brooke's baby is the final card?" He nodded. "A picture-perfect next generation, ready to inherit. That's how she plans to sway the old school board members." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Me, the girl who once stayed up all night building Grandpa's PowerPoint deck for a trade conference in 9th grade, the one he called his little partner, was now being pushed aside for a pregnancy bump. "She needs you out of the public image," he continued. "You don't fit the narrative she's selling." I clenched my fists. "So, this family dinner is a soft launch for the merger? And a final test?" he said firmly. "To see if you're still part of this family. Or just a variable to be removed." I sat in silence for a long moment. "Will you go with me?" "Not as your grandfather," he said, his eyes sharp with the edge of his former CEO self. "But as a founding shareholder." On Sunday night, our family's estate glowed like a Christmas gala. Guests' cars lined both sides of the street. I didn't enter through the front like a reluctant invitee. I walked with Grandpa Curtis through the side door, just like he taught me. Never enter center stage when you don't control the script. Mom appeared in a square-neck blue dress, smile pasted on like makeup. She froze for a fraction of a second when she saw Grandpa standing beside me. "Dad," she nodded, "I didn't know you were coming." I didn't know I was being replaced by a pregnancy-based merger strategy, he replied flatly. Brooke emerged from the dining room, her baby bump now obvious, clinging to Richard, the man who always spoke like he was pitching to investors. Lily, she smiled, eyes scanning me like I was a potential liability. I'm glad you came. You look different. I didn't reply, my eyes locked on a newly framed digital portrait in the hallway, a family picture. I wasn't in it. Mom cleared her throat. Let's begin dinner. Brooke and Richard have something to share. Our family is about to enter a new era. Grandpa leaned in and whispered to me. When they raise their glasses, stand up. Read the paragraph I marked in the merger draft. Then ask them, does this family still have room for truth? I nodded, voice barely audible. They're not ready. He placed his hand on my shoulder. No? But you are. Dinner was staged like a ceremony. Pristine white tablecloths, flickering upscale candles, and glasses filled with non-alcoholic champagne. As if to ease the conscience of wealthy people pretending to be virtuous. I was seated at the far end of the table, next to a distant aunt wearing overpowering perfume and a frozen smile. My mother moved like a theater director, controlling every gesture, every angle. Everything was too perfect, too polished. Which only confirmed something was deeply wrong beneath the surface. When I excused myself to get more water, she barely glanced up before nodding, too busy charming some elderly investor from Chicago. I didn't head to the kitchen. Instead, I slipped into the hallway that led to the library. The room my father once called the only place left to breathe in this house. The library door was ajar. As I approached, I heard my mother's voice, just loud enough to chill my spine. Everything's going according to plan. You just need to keep playing your role, Brooke. You mean as a baby-making machine? Brooke's voice was so dry I barely recognized it. Don't talk like that, you're creating a symbol. A model for the company's future. A child born from the union of two legacy families. They won't dare block the merger. But what if Grandpa finds out? He won't forgive this. He won't have a choice, Mom replied coldly. He's sentimental, soft. Especially when it comes to the first great-grandchild. Don't forget what he's said about legacy and passing the company on. A long pause. I took half a step closer. My hand clenched the doorframe. What about Lily? Brooke asked, her voice lower. She stays out of sight for now. She's not marketable. Too emotional. That so-called artistic passion will only drag us down. But what if she finds out? Mom let out a quiet, calculated laugh. She will. And she'll get angry. Like always. But who's going to believe a girl who got kicked out of her own house for emotional instability? Everyone already saw her meltdown at the birthday dinner. The script's already written. She ruined her own image a long time ago. I don't remember how I pulled myself away from that door. I just remember standing in the dim hallway, chest heaving, hands shaking as the truth sank in. I wasn't just being pushed aside, they were using me to justify a plan. I couldn't stay silent. When I returned to the dining room, the table had erupted in laughter over some story Richard was telling. Mom caught my eye, surprised to see me back so soon. But she quickly smiled again, pretending everything was under control. I didn't wait for the champagne toast. I pulled my chair back, stood up straight, and said clearly, Brooke, I have something to ask you. But, actually, I want everyone here to hear it. Silence. The sound of silverware froze against porcelain. I walked toward the head of the table, facing Mom. You're using Brooke's baby to manipulate Grandpa. To push through a merger you've been planning behind everyone's back. And you're cutting me out of everything, even this family. A beat of silence, then, laughter, from my mother. Lily, she said gently, like soothing a rebellious child. You're tired. This isn't the time for theatrics. It's not theatrics, I shot back. It's what you told Brooke. In the library. 10 minutes ago. I looked at Brooke. Her eyes flickered. Richard turned to my mother, visibly thrown. Grandpa Curtis set his glass down. Is that true, Amelia? Mom kept smiling, but this time, I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Dad, everything I've done was to protect the company's future. I only used an unborn child, he cut in, sharp, and discarded your own daughter like a liability? I looked at her one last time. You've always told me I'm too emotional. But maybe the real mistake in this room is someone forgetting that emotion is the only thing that keeps a family real. Then I turned and walked away from the dinner table. The sound of my mother's high heels echoed behind me like a forced melody. Tense, threatening, deliberate. I hadn't made it 10 steps from the dinner table before her voice cut through the air. Lily, stop. I didn't turn around. But her voice drew closer. Cold, like steel against my throat. I don't know what you think you're doing, but if you believe a few emotional outbursts can ruin a plan that took 2 years to build. Exactly. A deep, firm male voice interrupted without hesitation. I spun around. There stood Grandpa Curtis, still in his charcoal gray suit and that old tie I'd sketched dozens of times. He wasn't alone. Aunt Lorraine stepped in beside him, holding her familiar brown leather case. Around the table, relatives, guests, and business partners fell completely silent. Only my mother lost composure. Her face twitched, her eyes darting as if searching for an escape. But there was none. Dinner's still in progress, Dad, my mother said, forcing her voice into something polite. I don't think this is the right moment to discuss business. I strongly disagree, Grandpa replied, striding toward the table like it was his stage. I've come to understand that tonight's gathering isn't just about celebrating my granddaughter's pregnancy, but about launching a hidden merger plan. Using the unborn child as a pawn to sway shareholders. A murmur rippled down the table, mostly from Richard's side. And if what I've heard is accurate, he continued, then my daughter, Amelia, has not only orchestrated this narrative, but has also lobbied the board to shift voting power ahead of schedule. You have no proof, Mom retorted. This is all the word of a hurt child who refuses to grow up. Lily isn't speaking alone, Grandpa said, turning to Aunt Lorraine. She stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table with a thud that made the silverware tremble. These are copies of emails between Amelia and Richard's firm, proposing a strategic family merger. There are also recorded calls with partners, where she stated, and I quote, "The baby will force them to trust us." I clearly heard a silver spoon drop onto a porcelain plate. No more laughter. No more small talk. Just silence. Mom held onto her composure like a lifeline. She slowly pulled her napkin from her lap and stood. Lily, she said, turning to me. I've forgiven a lot from you. But dragging your grandfather into your little rebellion? That's the last straw. I met her gaze. No, Mom, you crossed the line. Not because I don't understand, but because you thought I'd never have the courage to speak. My voice was steady. For the first time in a year I wasn't trembling. You always said I was too sensitive, too emotional, too messy. But the truth is, you've always feared that I'd feel things you didn't want anyone to see. That everything you do isn't about legacy, it's about control. Brooke slowly stood, holding her belly. Her face had lost all color. Richard tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. Is it true? She asked, voice hoarse, eyes locked on Mom. Am I just a tool in your plan? You're overwhelmed, Brooke, Mom said quickly. Everything I've done is for you, for the baby, for this family. No. Grandpa cut her off. It was for power, and you just lost it. He pulled a sealed envelope from his coat. I'm temporarily suspending Amelia Whitman from the board of Curtis Simons Freight Co., pending an internal investigation into manipulation and exploitation of family interests for personal gain. My mother stepped back, no words, no allies. I looked around. Richard lowered his head. Brooke turned toward me, her eyes red, but finally seeing clearly. Aunt Lorraine gave me a slight nod, and Grandpa placed his hand firmly on my shoulder. I was no longer the one pushed aside, I was the one standing in the center between shadow and light. Between lies and the truth just spoken aloud. 3 days after that fateful dinner, a voicemail from Richard landed in my inbox. His voice was tight, urgent, and clipped. "Lily, we need to talk. There are documents your mother is trying to bury. Meet me at the office at 4. Come alone." I hesitated. I should have told Grandpa or Aunt Lorraine, but my gut whispered, if there's something worth knowing before Mom erases it all, it's now. I grabbed my coat, shoved my phone into my pocket, and walked out without leaving a note. Richard's office sat on the 17th floor of a cold, glass high-rise, just as icy as the way he always looked at me when he called me the uncontrollable problem child. I stepped into the elevator, feeling like I was drifting through steel. The doors opened. It wasn't Richard waiting. It was my mother. Amelia Whitman, flawlessly made-up face, sharp eyeliner, expensive tailored suit clinging to her body like armor, stood calmly in the silent room. "You came faster than I expected," she said, voice dripping with sweetness that instantly set off every alarm. I stepped back, ready to leave. But she entered the elevator and hit the emergency stop button. The doors slammed shut. The elevator jolted, then stilled between floors. "Just listen. One time. No interruptions." I crossed my arms. "You've got 1 minute. This could be very simple if you cooperate," she said, pulling a thick envelope from her bag. "It's an acceptance letter from a private art school in Switzerland. Very discreet, very far. Sign here and you'll have a fresh start. No pressure, no conflict." I scoffed. "Only, it's not an acceptance letter, is it?" She narrowed her eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about." I stepped forward, snatched the folder, and flipped through. The first page was from an arts academy. But further down, I spotted it. A familiar phrase, voluntary admission to Silver Ridge Mental Health Center. Ice ran down my spine. "You want to institutionalize me?" "Not institutionalize, Lily," she cooed. "Just stabilize. You need time to reflect. You're spiraling." "And if I say no?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she opened her tablet and played a video. I saw myself. At dinner. Standing, yelling, gesturing wildly. But the words I'd actually said were gone. The footage had been edited, chopped until I looked like a hysterical wreck. The part where I exposed the merger plan? Erased completely. "If you don't sign," she said, her voice now sharp, "this video will circulate. College admissions, scholarships, media, social platforms. Who's going to believe you after this?" I clenched my fists. "It's fake." "Any proof?" she smiled. "Who will they trust? A successful mother? Or a girl flagged for behavioral issues since age 12? Suddenly, the elevator doors opened. Grandpa Curtis stood there. Next to him was Aunt Lorraine. Both breathless, as if they'd just sprinted from the parking garage. He held out a hand. "Lily, don't sign anything." My mother's face changed instantly. "Dad, this is private. Between me and my daughter." "I don't think so," Grandpa said, stepping inside and taking the tablet from her. "This is the edited video, isn't it?" "I'm trying to help her," she snapped. "She's self-destructing, she's—" "No," he interrupted. "You're destroying her by pathologizing dissent, by turning mental health forums into weapons." Aunt Lorraine took the file from my hands, flipping to the last page. "This isn't a voluntary admission. It's a pre-prepared commitment order. You only needed her signature to legally declare Lily mentally unstable under state law. I shook, not from fear, but fury. Way? I asked. You were really willing to do all this, just to get me out of the way? She said nothing. But her eyes, no longer masked. Only arrogance and pride remained. Fine, I said. If you think that video can beat the truth, go ahead, release it. I pulled out my phone and opened my voice recording app. But remember this. There are 4 people in this elevator. And you can't control all of them. Grandpa's voice came low, steady, and full of the storm that was coming. Game over, Amelia. She didn't speak again. But for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. And I knew. If she wanted to cast me as the darkness, then I would become the light that forced every shadow to reveal itself. The office door burst open again before any of us could react. Brooke stepped in, sweat on her brow, clutching her phone like it contained something that could set the whole building ablaze. You lied, Mom, she panted, voice sharp with fury. And I have proof. No one said a word. Not even Mom. She instinctively stepped back, a flicker of fear passing across her face. Brooke opened her voice recorder app, selected a file, and hit play. Mom's voice rang out loud and clear through the speaker. Cold, calculated, undeniable. Cut the part where Lily talks about the merger, add clips of her screaming. People just need to see a girl out of control. And that old man Curtis? Corner him emotionally. Once Brooke announces the pregnancy during dinner, he'll go soft. Lily's not the problem. She's the leftover in the equation. Someone like her can't represent the company. Each sentence was a slap in the face. But not to me. To her. Grandpa Curtis gripped the edge of the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. No one had ever seen him like that. Even Aunt Lorraine stood frozen. Brooke's eyes locked onto Mom's. I heard everything. Every single word. You didn't just use me. You used my child. You don't love this baby. You just need it as a bargaining chip. Mom's voice trembled. You don't understand the bigger picture. No, Grandpa cut in, voice shaking but razor sharp. Amelia, it's you who doesn't understand. Family is not strategy, not a tool, and certainly not a weapon to destroy each other. From his coat, he pulled out a hard copy of the Curtis Simons board charter. I had never seen him bring that anywhere. That meant one thing. He came prepared. Lily, he said, turning to me. Give me the commitment form your mother tried to make you sign. I handed it to him, my hands still trembling. He read it over quickly. Then tore it in half right in the middle of the room. The pieces fluttered to the floor like a verdict. Amelia Whitman, he said, looking straight at my mother. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all positions at Curtis Simons Freight Co. The board will convene within 48 hours to vote on permanent removal. In the meantime, I'm transferring interim leadership to Callista Simons and your daughters, Lily Whitman and Brooke Sanders. Mom went pale. Her face drained, but her eyes still rigid, still refusing to break. You think you've won, she hissed. That company is my blood. I gave my whole life to keeping it alive. No one's denying that. Aunt Lorraine spoke up, her voice sharp as glass for the first time. But you were wrong to believe that, gave you the right to decide who gets to exist in this so-called family business. Richard leaned silently against the wall, saying nothing. I saw him take a half step toward Brooke, but she backed away. You knew, she said, her voice low. And you stayed silent. From now on, I don't need you either. No one had to scream, no one had to call security. The real power was in the silence, when everyone finally realized what they'd lost. And that it could never be reclaimed. I walked over to Brooke. We looked at each other for just a second, but I saw it. Regret, yes. But gratitude too, she whispered. You were right. You were the only one who didn't look away. I smiled faintly. That's because I was the only one who never needed her pride to survive. Grandpa turned to me. Do you want to say anything, Lily? I nodded. I don't need an apology. But if this is the moment we're rebuilding the company, I have one condition. All eyes turned to me. I want to create a nonprofit division, one dedicated to helping teens pushed aside by their own families, funded by a percentage of the company's profits. Aunt Lorraine smiled. Brooke nodded. Grandpa didn't say anything. He just placed a firm hand on my shoulder. The world's beginning to change, Lily, and you just opened the first door. I looked at Mom one last time. She turned away, eyes distant, like someone who had just lost the only home they ever built. But this time, I didn't feel pain. Only relief, like I had finally taken off an invisible armor that had weighed on my heart for years. I arrived in Berkeley on a crisp autumn morning. Sunlight soft enough to ease the air, yet still laced with the lingering chill of old wounds. The city greeted me with the scent of wood, the hush of bicycle tires gliding over sidewalks, and rows of moss-covered buildings that looked like they had seen thousands of broken beginnings, stitched into something new. My dorm room was small, but full of light. I taped my first drawing to the wall. A view from Aunt Lorraine's window, the one I had sketched after that night she placed a warm mug of milk on my table and said, "You're not selfish, sweetheart. You've just spent too long being quiet." I wasn't quiet anymore. My first class was about contemporary art, and the role of personal memory in creation. Professor Daniels gave us this assignment. Draw a space that once imprisoned you. Then transform it into somewhere you'd want to return to. I knew exactly what I would draw. For the next 3 weeks, I disappeared into pastel dust, acrylic paint, and the crisp scent of new paper. Nobody in the class asked too many questions, but I could tell they felt something private, unraveling across every layer of color. I painted the old room, not the pastel nursery my mother had staged with white cribs and wall decals, but the room as I remembered it. The chipped paint, the torn corners of movie posters I had retaped. I let light stream through the curtains, casting a glow on the corner where I once kept the box of colored pencils Grandpa Curtis sent me. But unlike the real version, in this painting, I left an easel behind, and on that easel, a sketch of myself. Hair messy, eyes red, but clutching a paintbrush like it was armor. I titled the piece, Return. At the semester showcase, Professor Daniels chose my work for the center wall. I stood in the corner, avoiding cameras, but watched as people paused longer in front of my painting. A middle-aged woman cried. A freshman whispered to her friend, "It feels so real, so painful, but warm too." That night, Brooke texted me, "I saw a photo of your painting on the school page. It hit deeper than any article I've read. Thank you for not becoming a copy of Mom." I read her message in silence. For the first time in a long while, her name didn't bring tension. The following week, I received a letter from Grandpa Curtis. Inside was a business magazine with a headline, Curtis Simons Restructures. Hands reins to new generation. Below was a photo of Aunt Lorraine signing a partnership deal with an arts training center for at-risk youth. The caption read, "Initiative, proposed by Lily Whitman." I sat still for a long time. Not out of pride, but because, for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be trusted. That night, I returned to the studio alone, carrying a new easel. I wanted to start my next project. A series titled, Places I Used to Disappear. Unlike before, I wasn't drawing to be seen. I was drawing to remember I had survived. After midnight, with the studio lights off, my phone buzzed. An unnamed message. "I know you hate me, but if one day you ever want to understand why I made those choices, I'll still be here." I didn't reply. Instead, I looked at the painting forming under my hands. A girl, standing in a dark room, holding a flashlight. The beam lit up a wall with scribbles someone had tried to erase. But traces still lingered. I didn't know if forgiveness would come. But I knew this much. From now on, I get to decide what stays, and what becomes just a lesson in the archive of memory. I pressed the brush down. The next piece had begun. And I was no longer a side character in my own story. Late that winter, I returned to my hometown, not to go back, but to inaugurate the first art therapy center I had proposed, and Aunt Lorraine now directed. The center was named New Line Studio, built inside a refurbished storage wing behind the Curtis Simons headquarters, once a cold concrete archive room. Now, its walls glowed with warm tones. Burnt orange, olive green, pale yellow. Each color chosen by the kids enrolled in our pilot class. Aunt Lorraine, still the heartbeat of everything, placed a hand on my shoulder as we hung the wooden sign by the entrance. "You did it," she said, her eyes shimmering with pride. "Not alone," I smiled. The opening wasn't flashy. No reporters. Just close family, a few Berkeley classmates volunteering, and the children in the first cohort. In the small crowd, I saw Brooke standing under a tree, holding her newborn daughter, Clara. When I walked over, she looked up and smiled. "She's obsessed with the smell of oil paint," she joked. "Every time I paint, she sleeps like a rock." I looked at Clara. So small, yet the catalyst of so many irreversible shifts. Brooke no longer dyed her hair the way Mom liked. No longer wore lipstick to match the executive wife look. She wore a worn beige sweater, her hair in a loose bun, and held her baby with steady, unshaking hands. "You're still painting?" I asked. "I think for the first time, I've actually started," she said softly, then paused. "Thank you, Lily. Not just for not giving up, but for not giving up on the ones who once gave up on you." I didn't answer. I just stood beside her, heart light as air. A few days after the opening, I received an unmarked parcel. The handwriting on the envelope made my chest tighten. Mom's. Inside was a short handwritten letter. "Lily, I don't know where to begin, so I won't try. I read the article from your school page. I saw your painting, return. I may not deserve understanding, but you should know. Not a day passes that I don't think about what I did to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but if one day you have space for conversation, I'll be here. Amelia." No apology, no justifications. But the pride was gone too. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box, where I kept things I wasn't ready to explain. Maybe one day I'd write back. But not today. I didn't need to in order to feel peace. The next morning, I sat with Grandpa Curtis in the back courtyard of the center. He'd stepped down from his leadership role, now just an honorary advisor. But I knew, as long as he was breathing, he'd be watching every step I took. "Do you think I've stopped being angry at Mom?" I asked, stirring my coffee, eyes on the wind brushing the trees. "Anger's not the issue," he said. "The real question is, are you still letting it decide how you live?" I nodded. "Then I think I'm okay." He smiled, an expression warmer than any coming spring. That day, when the kids finished their first paintings in our pilot class, I walked around, stopping at the easel of a curly-haired girl named Mia. She had painted a dark room. But in the back was a small, open door, light streaming through a narrow crack. "Is that your room?" I asked. Mia nodded. "But," I added, "a door. You said paintings don't have to match real life." I smiled, and tears welled up without warning. "That's right, Mia, we get to redraw it." And maybe that's the greatest lesson I've ever learned. That life doesn't have to be perfect or tied up like a final chapter. Every person, every relationship, even the fractured parts of a family are just unfinished canvases, waiting to be continued, if we're brave enough to pick up the brush. Lily's story reminds us that not everyone is born into a family that knows how to love the right way. But everyone has the right to rewrite their own life. When truth is distorted and family becomes a tool of control, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Forgiveness may not always be necessary, but healing can begin with setting boundaries. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't revenge. It's choosing to live on your own terms and turning pain into light. What do you think about Lily's journey and how she faced her family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more.
I'm Catherine Blake. I'm 36 years old and live in Portland, Oregon, with my husband, Ethan, and our 8-year-old daughter, Mia. Last week, Ethan suddenly passed away from a heart attack while at work. I still can't believe it's real. Everything happened so fast, my brain couldn't keep up. That morning, Ethan woke up early, like usual, made coffee, toasted some bread, and left a sticky note next to Mia's milk. "I'll be home early tonight. Don't forget the blue dress you picked for your performance." He kissed my forehead before heading out, leaving behind that familiar minty scent and the kind of smile that made people feel safe. I remember Mia's eyes lighting up as she said, "Dad promised, okay? I'm the star today." I nodded, smoothing down her hair, my heart full. Just hours later, my world collapsed. It was exactly 11:20 a.m. when I got the call from Lauren, Ethan's assistant. Her voice was shaking. "Catherine, Ethan, he collapsed in a client meeting. They're taking him to St. Vincent. It's serious, critical." I dropped the phone. Cold spread from my feet up to my chest. I immediately called the neighbors and asked them to pick me up from school, then rushed to the car. I don't remember how many red lights I ran. My hands were trembling the whole time, and I kept whispering, "Please, no, please not this." By the time I arrived at the hospital, the doctor just shook his head. Ethan had died at 11:18 a.m. They said the heart attack hit too fast. There wasn't time to save him. I stood frozen before his body. The man who'd asked me that very morning to grab more maple syrup. Now lying still, cold, gone. I don't know how long I cried, but when I stepped out of that freezing room, the only thought in my mind was to call my parents. I needed them. I needed a hug, comfort, someone to say, "You'll be okay." I called my mom. It rang 5 times before she picked up. Laughter and music burst through the line, numbing me instantly. "Hello? Make it quick, honey. We're having a blast over here," she said, clearly in party mode. I tried to stay calm. "Mom, Ethan's gone. He had a heart attack? At work?" There was a pause, then a nervous chuckle. "You're joking, right? That's not funny. It's Lindsay's birthday. We're having dinner at a Mexican place. Can this wait until tomorrow?" I couldn't breathe. "Mom, not joking. I just saw my husband's body. He's really gone?" "Oh my God," she sighed. "But Lindsay planned this for weeks. Are you okay? I'll come by tomorrow, all right? Now's not the best time." Not the best time. I ended the call before she could finish. I collapsed onto the hospital hallway floor, gripping my phone, tears flooding my face. In the worst moment of my life, all I had wanted was an embrace. But all I got was a careless brush off. My mother chose birthday cake and margaritas over coming to me. No one held me that day. There was only silence, and the tick-tock of the hospital clock clawing at my chest. That night, Mia and I curled up in a room filled with the smell of unwashed shirts Ethan left behind. I couldn't bring myself to tell her her father wasn't coming home. I had no idea how to say the words. But one thing I knew for certain, from that moment on, I had to toughen up. Not just to survive, but to protect my daughter from the very people who were supposed to be our refuge. Ethan's funeral was held on a Saturday morning at a small chapel on the west side of Portland. The sky was crystal clear, sunlight cutting through golden maple leaves. A cruelly beautiful light on the day my heart shattered a second time. Mia and I arrived early. She wore the sky blue dress Ethan once called her real princess gown. I braided her hair just the way he used to on special days. She held my hand tightly, eyes red but resolute. Not a single tear fell from her. I, on the other hand, had to pull over 3 times just to breathe. The first to arrive were Ethan's close colleagues from the financial law firm. They brought elegant floral arrangements. A few couldn't hold back tears when they saw me. Ryan's, Ethan's supervisor, hugged me tightly before whispering, voice hoarse, he was the only one here who turned down commission to get higher life insurance for his family. Not everyone would do that. I tried to smile, but my throat tightened. Every kind thing Ethan ever did for us now weighed on my chest like warm bricks, comforting and crushing at the same time. I turned, looking for my parents. They had promised to come early to help welcome guests. But by 9:50, 10 minutes before the service, the family section was still empty. At 10:03, my phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Stuck in construction traffic. GPS says 15 minutes late. Save us some seats. Save seats? I reread it, hoping I misunderstood, but no. They were going to be late to the funeral of the son-in-law they once called America's best, and they wanted me to reserve spots. They walked in minutes after the service began. My mother's heels clacked sharply through the silence, heads turning. She wore a silver floral dress, not black. My father kept his golf outfit on, with only a token jacket thrown over it. And Lindsay, my sister, was on the phone. I held it in. They sat in the front row I'd left open. My mother bowed her head and dabbed her eyes with a tissue still creased from the packaging. I'd seen that kind of performance all my life. When the pastor invited me to give the eulogy, Lindsay leaned in to whisper to Mom, and they both glanced at their phones. I stepped up to the podium, mic in hand, voice trembling but not breaking. I spoke about Ethan, the man who never forgot to buy extra toothpaste before I asked, the dad who couldn't play soccer but watched YouTube every night to coach Mia's team. I talked about how he read bedtime stories even after 12-hour days, and I ended with his favorite line, "Family is a choice you make every day, not a part you play on weekends." I didn't look at my parents when I said it, but I knew they heard. The reception was held at our house. Ethan had remodeled the kitchen so there would be room for gatherings like this. I couldn't eat, but I greeted everyone, accepting hugs, condolences, little stories about Ethan I'd never heard before. Each one cut deep, but also helped piece him back together in my memory. Mom and Lindsay camped out on the living room couch. They didn't offer to help with tea or cleanup. My mom clutched a glass of wine, chatting with a distant cousin. I accidentally overheard her say, quietly, "I heard Ethan had a pretty big life insurance policy. Which firm handled it?" My mother turned sharply. "What did you just say?" She smiled. "Oh, nothing. Just curious, honey. You know, it's time to think ahead. It must have been a 6-figure payout." I didn't respond. A chill spread through me. Lindsay shrugged. "She means you're set now. I mean, Ethan left a lot, didn't he?" I set my glass on the counter, hands shaking. I looked at the 2 women who raised me and shared my childhood and realized they weren't really here for Ethan. They weren't grieving him. They came to see what Catherine got out of her husband's death. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by cold food and wilting flowers. Mia had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching one of Ethan's old sweaters. I looked at her, then looked away. The house was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. But my spirit was no longer fragile, no longer trembling. Something had changed after that final glance with my mother today. The funeral was an end for Ethan, but it was the beginning of an awakening for me. From now on, I would no longer romanticize blood ties. If they couldn't show up with love, they had no place in the world I was building, for Mia and for myself. 12 days after the funeral, when the house had begun to empty of flowers and the half-hearted hugs from neighbors, my parents showed up on my front porch. No warning, no message, just knocking on the door while I was sitting with Ethan's life insurance payout breakdown. I opened the door in an old pair of pajamas, my hair tied back in a loose bun, dark circles under my eyes. My mom wore a beige cashmere sweater clutching a large purse. My dad still had his usual banker look, crisp white shirt, blue tie, polished leather shoes. The kind he wore when visiting financial advisors. We're just stopping by for a bit, my mom said quickly. We need to talk, Catherine. Is Mia home? She's at school, I replied. I didn't invite them in, but they walked inside anyway, like this place had always been theirs since I was in 4th grade. I set my water bottle down on the table. They took the seats across from me like this was some formal family meeting. Not the first time we'd seen each other since Ethan's funeral. I knew they hadn't come to check on my well-being. My mom glanced around the living room, her eyes landing on the built-in speaker system Ethan had painstakingly installed over a week. My dad cleared his throat, like queuing up a rehearsed speech. Catherine, we know you're exhausted. Losing Ethan was a shock, no one denies that, but you need to think ahead. For Mia, for the family. I sat still, my hands clasped tightly. What are you saying? I asked. Well, your mom and I are getting older. Medications aren't cheap, pensions barely cover essentials. Your mother's having serious knee trouble. Doctor says surgery's needed. He paused. And Lindsay, she's still struggling with her art studio. No one buys paintings anymore. It's stressful for her. I exhaled slowly, still silent. Ethan, my mom jumped in. He was responsible. He made sure you and Mia would be taken care of, right? My mother left. Enough. Yes, I said flatly. Then, my dad leaned forward, voice low and steady. We think it's only fair that 50% of that life insurance goes to the extended family. Half for you, Mia, and your mother. Half for us, your parents, and Lindsay. It's reasonable. No one loses. I let out a laugh, dry, empty of humor. Excuse me? You might not agree, he went on, but consider this, Catherine. We paid for your college, your first car, the down payment on your first apartment. Don't you think it's time to give back? By using my husband's death benefit, I asked, voice barely above a whisper but sharp as glass. That money's meant for Mia's education, for her to have a good life. It's what Ethan wanted, not for my mother, not for Lindsay, who, by the way, still doesn't hold a stable job at 32. You're overreacting, my mom said, placing a hand on my shoulder like comfort. Families share. We're not asking for everything, just half. Ethan would have agreed. Don't use Ethan to justify this, I cut her off. He'd be furious. My dad's face darkened. He pulled a folder from his inner coat pocket. Pages of spreadsheets neatly printed. This outlines the division based on living needs, medical costs, future planning. Read it before deciding. I stood. No need. The answer is no. Not half, not a quarter, not 1 cent. Catherine, that's selfish, my mother snapped. How can you call yourself family? If being family means giving up my daughter's future for people who didn't even show up for us when it mattered, then I'd rather have no family at all. My dad's face turned red. You're destroying what's left of this family. No, I said, opening the door. You did that when you arrived late to Ethan's funeral, checked your phones during the service, and now come here demanding a share of a man who's barely been gone 2 weeks. No one walked out of my house with their head held high that day. When the door slammed behind them, something inside me cracked. And somehow, it also settled. It was the clean break I hadn't known I needed. 3 days after my parents left the house in that chilling silence, I thought things would quiet down. I was wrong, and the first to suffer from their greed wasn't me. It was Mia. That Wednesday, I picked her up early from school because of a headache. She unbuckled her seatbelt without saying a word, her face tight, lips pressed together like she was holding something in. When I opened the back door to help her with her backpack, she suddenly turned and asked, Mom, did Grandma and Grandpa try to take Dad's money? I froze. Who told you that? She looked down, her voice shrinking. At the funeral, when you were talking to Mr. Ryan, I went to find tissues. I heard Grandpa talking to Uncle Michael. He said Ethan left a massive insurance policy. It's time Catherine thinks of the family. My chest tightened. Mia went on, her eyes turning red. At first I thought I misheard, but on Monday, during art class, Grandma came by and gave me one of her old bracelets. Then she asked, Has your mom said anything about your dad's money? I told her no, and she said, Then don't say anything to anyone. This is grown-up stuff. I had to grip the car door to stay upright. Why would they do that to me? Mia looked up, tears falling. I thought they loved Dad. I thought they loved me too. I dropped to my knees, pulled her into my arms, stroking her hair with a tight throat. Mia, some people come into our lives because they love us. Others show up only when they want something. I'm sorry you had to see the ugly side of grown-ups so soon. She said nothing, just buried her face in my shoulder. We sat on the front steps in the soft evening light, wrapped in a heavy silence. For the first time, I felt like a part of her childhood had been stolen, not by choice, but by people who forced her to grow up too early. That evening, Mia ate dinner quietly, didn't ask about homework, and didn't beg for cartoons like she usually did. After the dishes, I found her in the living room with her sketchbook and a box of colored pencils. What are you working on? I asked. Something important, she replied without looking up. I didn't press. Even though I was curious, I respected the space she needed. When she went to bed, I saw the unfinished drawing on the table, scrawled in wobbly block letters at the top. The people who really love me. In the drawing, Mia, Ethan, and I were having dinner together. By the window stood a man in a blue cap. I recognized him instantly, Marcus, Ethan's younger brother. I hadn't spoken to Mia much about Marcus, who lived in Colorado but called occasionally. But maybe, for a child, a single genuine, "How are you feeling today?" was enough to feel real love. I sat down and typed a message to Marcus. If you're free, could you come to Portland for a few days? Not just for me, but for Mia. She's aged years in just a few days, and I'm doing my best to keep her believing in good people. He replied in under 10 minutes. Don't worry. I'll fly out tomorrow night. I promise, Ethan, if anything happened, I'd be there for the two of you. I broke down, not from anger this time, but from relief. For the first time in days, I didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, as I prepped breakfast, Mia walked into the kitchen with a handmade envelope folded from craft paper. This is for you, but you can't open it yet. Not until the right time. When's the right time? When they come back. I think they will, right? I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. Maybe. And if they do, I promise you won't face them alone. Mia nodded back, then said something I'll never forget. If they come back, I have something to say too. Dad said, sometimes being brave doesn't mean fighting. It means telling the truth, even if you're the smallest person in the room. I looked at her, my heart aching with pride. She was only 8, but in that moment I saw the brightest reflection of Ethan in her. Steady, kind, and unshakably brave. Even when standing alone against those who shared her blood. Saturday afternoon, I received a text from my father. Sunday, 2 p.m., family meeting at the house. Something important to discuss. Bring a family spirit, not resentment. I read it 3 times, still unable to grasp what they were thinking. After everything, demanding a share of my husband's life insurance less than 2 weeks after the funeral, hurting my daughter, they still believed I would show up, listen, and reconsider? I planned not to go. I even typed a refusal, but then I looked over at Mia, sitting at the table, coloring a sheet of paper and carefully placing it into a yellow envelope. She looked at me, strangely calm. Mom, I want to go. Dad wouldn't want us to hide. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I knew Mia needed to say something. Not for me, for herself. We arrived on time. The house I grew up in felt more unfamiliar than ever. Parked outside were Uncle Charles's silver SUV and Aunt Linda's sedan. Dad opened the door, wearing a forced smile over tight nerves. Mom stood in the kitchen, pouring orange juice like it was a regular Sunday brunch. The living room had been rearranged. A large couch faced the coffee table, surrounded by 4 chairs like we were about to enter some kind of family tribunal. Lindsay sat beside Mom, fidgeting with her phone. As Mia and I walked in, every eye turned to us. I looked around and spoke bluntly. If this is about Ethan's insurance money, we won't be staying long. Catherine, Dad said, overly calm. This is about honest discussion. No one's pressuring you. And let's be honest. I sat down, pulling Mia close. We've thought this through, Mom began. We want to propose something fair. 40% of the insurance goes to us, 10% to Lindsay to start her art studio. The remaining 50% stays with you and Mia. Fair? I laughed. Fair to whom? Lindsay, who's never held a job longer than 6 months? Or to you two, who showed up late to the funeral and asked about the insurance while I was arranging my husband's burial? You're insulting everyone here, Lindsay snapped. We're here for family. You're just hoarding money. Before I could respond, Mia quietly stood and pulled the yellow envelope from her small purse. The room fell silent. I'd like to say something. Mom frowned. This isn't something kids should be involved in, Mia. If it's not right for me to hear, Mia said calmly, then adults shouldn't have said it in front of me. She unfolded a paper creased in thirds. On the front, written in bold red crayon, Family Love Invoice. Mia took a deep breath and read aloud. Present the night Mom and I found out about Dad. $0. Not present, all to check on me when I cried every night. $0. No calls. Tell me everything will be okay. $0. No one said that. Bring gifts just to ask if I miss Dad. Then ask Mom about money. $0. Present but not for me. Real love, priceless but not present. The room went still. I heard Mom swallow hard. Lindsay put her phone down, her face burning red. Dad couldn't meet Mia's eyes. I just want to say, Mia finished, folding the paper, I still love Grandpa, Grandma, and Aunt Lindsay. But if love only shows up when there's money, that's not the kind of love I need. I squeezed her hand, overwhelmed with pride. We'll be going now, I said, standing up. Catherine, Mom stammered, are you cutting us off? No, but from now on, if you want to see your granddaughter, you'll have to relearn how to be grown-ups, not people demanding money while their daughter is still in mourning. Mia and I walked out of that house like stepping off a stage we'd been forced to perform on for years. And for the first time since Ethan passed, even though the grief remained, we had reclaimed something worth more than any insurance payout. Our dignity. Monday morning, after the family meeting, I woke up in a haze of exhaustion and relief. Mia had fallen asleep early the night before, saying nothing after delivering her emotional invoice to the room. But I knew something inside her had shifted, just like it had inside me. We weren't the silent ones anymore. The first thing I did was call Ethan's attorney, Valerie Myers, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 40s who had helped us draft Ethan's will and set up Mia's scholarship fund. Catherine, you did the right thing by calling early, Valerie said after I explained the family ambush. I'll draft a formal notice stating that all of Ethan's assets are under legal protection and any attempts to interfere could be considered financial harassment. I also want a firm boundary in place, I said clearly. I don't want them around Mia. No calls, no gifts, no surprise visits. Do you want me to send a cease and desist? Not yet, I sighed, but be ready. I hung up and blocked every number. My parents, Lindsay even, Aunt Linda. Who had the nerve to message me afterward? Family is about sharing, not dividing. I hope your little girl doesn't get hurt by your stubbornness. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I saved every message, converted them into PDFs, and forwarded them to Valerie, as she advised. That same day, I called Mr. Daniels, the principal at Mia's school. I need your staff to strictly enforce pickup protocols. No one outside my approved list is allowed to approach Mia, even if they claim to be family. Unless I give written permission, keep them away. He agreed immediately, and I could tell he'd already heard whispers. We'll heighten gate security and notify the entire faculty, he reassured me. Mia's a bright, well-loved student. We'll keep her safe. I felt a bit lighter. But deep down, I remained on edge. With my parents, greed always came dressed in morality. They'd wear the label of caring grandparents if it gave them leverage to access any part of my life or my daughter's. 2 days later, a large cream envelope was slipped under our door. No postage, no return address. Inside was a typed letter signed Bradley and Elaine Whitaker. My parents' full names, written in their classic, guilt-drenched civility. We are deeply hurt by your reaction to what was meant as a gesture of goodwill. Denying grandparents access to their grandchild may constitute grounds for legal action if continued. We love Mia and only wish to fulfill our rightful role in her life. Please reconsider before things escalate. I didn't feel anger, just fatigue. They never apologized. They only rebranded old control in new language. I photographed every page and sent it to Valerie. If this goes on, I texted her, I want to escalate. Restraining order if needed. She replied with one line, I'm on it. They've just drawn the line for us. Mia, meanwhile, never brought up her grandparents all week, until Friday night. As I folded laundry, she came into my room, hugging the bear pillow her dad had given her. Mom, if they come back, what will you do? I sat down and patted the bed. I won't let anyone hurt you again, no matter who they are. But what if they really apologize? I looked into her eyes. There was still hope. Some part of Mia still wanted to believe in the good version of family. And I couldn't take that from her. If they're sincere, I'll listen. But listening doesn't mean instant forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. She nodded, then asked one last question before curling into me. Do I get to choose not to forgive? I wrapped her in my arms. Yes, and you also get to choose not to let them back in, if they don't deserve it. That night, I silenced my phone, turned off all notifications, even shut down the Wi-Fi. I reopened our photo archive. Wedding pictures, Ethan cradling newborn Mia, our summer trip to Crater Lake, amid the threats, power plays, and letters masked as family concern. I realized I'd begun building a different kind of world. 10 days after the threatening letter from my parents, Marcus showed up on my porch one rainy afternoon, soaked coat, suitcase in hand, and a calm look in his eyes like he'd never left Portland. I thought you said you'd be back in the summer, I asked, still not believing it. Plans changed. The university in Denver granted me leave for the next semester, and your brother made it clear, if anything happens, be there with them, Marcus said firmly. So I'm here for at least 6 months, hopefully longer. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Sometimes thank you feels too small for the weight someone's willing to carry. That night, Mia practically exploded with joy. She clung to Marcus like she'd found her father again. And in a way, she had. There was something of Ethan in Marcus. The way he walked, his laugh, even his ritual of making hot cocoa for kids with extra whipped cream. Uncle Marcus, do you know how to fix bikes? Mine's been all messed up for days. I do, and I can also make star-shaped pancakes. Want to trade? He winked. From that moment, our home no longer felt like a cave of grief. Having another adult around changed everything. Mia clung to me less, and I finally had time to breathe, to think, to sort through the mountains of Ethan's papers. Marcus didn't ask questions. He didn't offer cliché comforts. He simply stayed. When I cried, he didn't preach. He just handed me a tissue. When I exploded over yet another email from my family, Lindsay using a backup account, he calmly said, "You don't have to respond right away. You have the right to a life that isn't ruled by other people's rage." But Marcus wasn't the only steady hand. There was another source of comfort. My in-laws, Walter and Helen, from Tacoma, Washington. They called every evening, never intrusive, always asking just one thing. "Catherine, how are you today? Did Mia smile?" 3 weeks after the funeral, they drove nearly 4 hours to visit us. They brought food, photo albums of Ethan as a boy, and a tiny dress Mia had worn at age 3, one Helen had saved like treasure. I used to think mother-in-law dynamics would be the hardest part of grieving Ethan. I was wrong. Helen never tried to control anything. She just cooked, peeled fruit, and quietly placed flowers into the same crystal vase Ethan gave me one Valentine's Day. Ethan once said, if anything ever happened, you and Mia were his only priority. We didn't just lose a son, Catherine. We lost a piece of our hearts. But if we can still love Mia, then we haven't lost everything. I couldn't hold back tears. Walter didn't speak much, but that entire afternoon, he and Marcus repaired the backyard fence. The same one Ethan had always said he'd fix, but never got around to. That evening at dinner, Mia pulled out a crayon drawing and handed it to Helen. I drew Grandpa, Grandma, and Daddy. Daddy's sitting on a cloud watching us. You and Grandpa are holding me and Mommy down here. Helen broke down, hugging Mia tight. My granddaughter is just as brave as her dad. From that day on, Walter and Helen started visiting Portland every weekend. They never overstayed, never intruded, but somehow they always showed up exactly when I felt like I might fall apart. Marcus rented a small apartment 3 blocks from our home. He still came over every Tuesday and Friday to cook, took Mia to art class on Saturdays, and sometimes just sat beside me, reading in silence. No one said it aloud, but we all knew. A new kind of family was forming. Not perfect, not the same, but real and steady. One day I asked Marcus, "Don't you regret leaving a stable job in Denver?" He shrugged. I had a brother I admired. He always chose family over career. Now I'm just doing the same, and Mia deserves a man who doesn't disappear. I turned away to hide my tears. As night fell, I looked around the house bathed in kitchen light. Mia chattering about school with Helen, Marcus brewing tea, Walter checking the locks. And I realized losing Ethan left a wound that may never close. But in its place, something else was being stitched, thread by thread, with loyalty, kindness, and chosen love. And sometimes the best kind of family isn't bound by blood. It's made of those who stay, who love freely, and never ask for anything in return. One April morning, just as the tulips in the garden were blooming, I received a hand-delivered letter and a postcard of Cannon Beach, where Ethan once took us camping when Mia was 4. The envelope bore no legal emblem, no threats, no bolded headlines, just my mother's familiar handwriting, Elaine Whitaker. And the first line that made me sit down. My daughter, if your heart is still open enough to read this, let this be a first attempt. Not to demand, but to understand. I didn't expect much. After months of hostile texts, disappointment letters, and Lindsay's vague posts accusing me of destroying the family, I thought I had every reason to keep the last doors shut. But I read it anyway. Not for them, for myself. I needed to know if the silence of the past 3 months was surrender or reflection. My mother wrote about the night of the family meeting when Mia read her emotional invoice, how it left her without excuses. She shared that she saw a therapist for the first time, something my father resisted for weeks before joining her later. She didn't ask for forgiveness, she simply wrote. If I get another chance, I want to start over, not with you, but with my granddaughter, because she deserves more love if the person giving it has finally learned how to love right. I sat with that letter for hours. No tears, no anger, just silence. Later that afternoon, I printed it out and handed it to Marcus. What do you think? I think if this is an act, they deserve an Oscar. But if it's real, maybe Ethan would want you to try once. I didn't reply right away. 2 days later, a bouquet of white daisies arrived at my door. No card, no sender, but I knew. It was Ethan's tradition. He sent them every year on the anniversary of when I started working at the old architecture firm. Mia found them first. Who sent these, Mom? I'm not sure. Maybe Grandma and Grandpa? She paused. Did they say anything? I shook my head. I think they're trying to speak differently now. That night, Mia left a note on the kitchen counter. If Grandma says sorry to you, then I'll see her. But you come with me. Only once. Is that okay? I smiled and folded the note like a tiny treaty, one I vowed to protect. I emailed my mother. You may see Mia once at Cornerstone Cafe this Saturday afternoon. No talk of money, no talk of the past. If it goes well, maybe there will be a second time. Saturday afternoon, the cafe was quieter than usual. I chose a window seat. My mother arrived 5 minutes early. No heavy makeup, no flashy clothes, just a woman in late middle age with a small purse and cautious eyes. When she saw Mia, she smiled, for the first time, without expectation or performance. Hi, Mia. Hi, Grandma. Mia pulled out a chair for her. I stayed silent, watching. They talked about art class, her favorite scones, and the neighbor's dog that barked every morning at 7. No one mentioned Ethan. No one brought up the broken family. No apologies were spoken out loud, but there were silent moments, spaces that felt like apologies being rebuilt with action instead of words. Afterward, Mia held my hand walking back to the car. I didn't know Grandma could be that quiet, but I like that kind of quiet. I didn't respond. I just held her hand tighter. A week later, my father sent a letter, shorter but clearer than ever. You were right, I was wrong, no excuses. If allowed, I want to be a grandfather, not someone trying to claim a share. If not, I understand. I haven't replied yet, I need time, but for the first time in months, I unblocked his number. Because sometimes, forgiveness doesn't begin with forgetting, it starts with a door cracked open, just enough for light to slip through, and the rest, they must walk through on their own feet, with the truth in their hands. Catherine's story is a reminder that not everyone labeled family deserves a place in your life. When loss strikes, truth surfaces. Who cares, and who just benefits? Setting boundaries isn't ungrateful. It's protecting your peace and your child. In real life, sometimes you have to walk away from toxic ties to make room for real connection. Forgiveness may come, but only when change is shown through action, not words. What are your thoughts on Catherine's journey? Would you have made the same choice in her place? Share your perspective in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.